All right, good afternoon and welcome to the December 18th, 2024 Technical Review Committee meeting. It is 1 o'clock and the meeting's now in session. My name is Ryan Fisher. I'm the Director of Oldham County Planning and Development. The purpose of the Technical Review Committee meeting is to review proposed subdivisions, zoning map amendments, development plans before they go forth to the Planning Commission. This gives local agencies and utility companies that will provide services, those are up here in front of you today, the opportunity to review those plans, discuss and comment about the accessibility of services, and ensure all aspects of the development plans adhere to zoning and subdivision regulations. This meeting also provides adjoining property owners and concerned citizens in attendance the opportunity to ask technical questions of the applicants or the agencies that are represented before you today. So I'll repeat that at that very last statement. Make sure that if you come up in public comment that your questions are technical in nature at this point of either the applicants or the agencies before you. All right, technical in nature. So with that, we have 3 cases on the docket today. All 3 cases will run the same format. We'll begin by having the applicant come forward and give a brief presentation or overview of their project. The agencies that are then represented here before you will provide their comments. If we've received any written comments from agencies that are unable to be here, we will also read those into the record as well. And then we will have anybody come forward for public comment. If you do come forward, we just ask that you state your name and address for the record slowly so that our clerk can write that down. And then once again, make sure that your comments remain technical in nature at this point. So if there's no other questions, we'll begin with the first case. That's TRC 24-017 for Chateau Cerise on Highway 53 in LaGrange. Is that microphone on? If there's a button down at the bottom, bottom of the microphone.
There's a green light.
There you go.
Feels better. And I'll have to stand back a little bit.
Name again? You state your name and address again.
Okay, it's Mike Gregory. Address is 6100 Dutchman's Lane, Suite 1100, Louisville, Kentucky 40205. And that's my office address. And I do represent Chateau Cerise. And so we're here today. We've filed a pre-application, or an application actually, for rezoning of what is the former Cherry House property. Excuse me, we have asked for an industrial park district as in our application. We've had the neighborhood meeting, and we've had some discussions with both neighboring property owners and certainly with some of the staff here at zoning. Our purpose is mostly to make the property conform now to the use that it has enjoyed for about 50 years, which preceded zoning in the county. So as we look at the Cherry House, and it had warehousing, it had furniture assembly, they had delivery services to and from. The property had up to 1,000 cars at any given time in their peak times in the operation, and so our assessment is fitting it into the IPD with light industrial uses potential is the best way for us to get the property back in conformance with the zoning, and also to allow the owners to get tenants on the property as quickly as possible. That's their intent. So if that's short enough presentation, we're ready for questions.
All right, and we'll begin with Anna Barge, our senior planner, who's handling this case.
I'll give you these comments when I'm done, or if you want a copy now, I can go ahead and give
whatever
that to
works
you.
for you.
Okay.
That's good.
Sometimes it's easier to read along as I read these. Make sure to include a sketch map of the relative location of the parcels to surrounding streets. Verify that all abutting streets or private roads have the location, names, and dimensions. Indicate the bearings and dimensions for all boundary lines. Indicate lines showing the intersection of adjoining parcels to the site. Verify that all locations of utilities have been indicated on the plan. Verify that all the easements are noted on the plan. indicate areas of substantial trees, including general description of their types and sizes, indicate the lakes, ponds, marshes, wetlands, and soil types, note whether there are any areas of steep slope. If there aren't any, just note that, include the notation of existing man-made features. I believe y'all plan to keep all of them at this time, but
Yes,
just note that on there. And then also, I'm not going to read all the addresses that need to be updated, but make sure that all of those addresses are updated. And then number 15, indicate the sanitary sewer, street grades, and other facilities, indicate provisions for screening, buffering, and landscaping, and then note the proposed zoning on the plan, note the number of parking spaces required and provided. That maybe, I don't know if you want to comment on the parking spaces situation with that zoning. Do you want to?
No,
Not
right
at this
now.
time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then include a legend that provides graphical and written explanation of all symbols
Okay.
and labels.
And I probably should have stated earlier too, this is a little bit of an unusual situation.
Right.
We don't have a development plan. But for the use that we intend for the property, the existing buildings that are there, it's all going to remain the same. There's really nothing planned that is going to change, and it should not actually change the nature of the services for the time being. Now, if and when development does occur, we would be having to come back, get plan approval, and then there may be some changes that would have to be made. But yeah, looking at the sanitary sewers and things like that, it brought to mind, I should have said that earlier.
Yeah. And you're correct in what she was saying about, the parking is obviously that goes off of the uses in addition to potential uses that may generate traffic during peak hours that may potentially have to come back. But yeah, we wouldn't want to probably comment on the parking yet because we don't know what the uses are. But
Exactly.
so.
Yeah. And I'm sorry that it's that unusual. It's just the way the situation is developed for the property owners.
All right. Mr. Williams, I won't call on you because I know it's not a residential development, so you don't need to worry about school capacity. So we'll go to Mr. Silliman.
So you kind of summed up what my comments are in this, that I can't comment on any of it. Typically, we're looking at stormwater based on changes of impervious surface or traffic based on changes in use, and with no use or changes noted, it's impossible for me to determine if traffic studies required or detention's required. So I'm really not sure what the purpose is. I think we need to see what the changes in use are going to be.
Yeah, understand. And right at the moment, they're in order to just get tenants back on the property, there really won't be any changes. There may be in the future, but there's not any planned even in the near future.
I guess then why change the zoning then if it's going to operate the same as it does and it's.
It won't. In other words, we can't get
Well,
tenants
then we need to
on-
know
we
what the
can't-
change is.
I understand. We can't get tenants on the property with the current zoning. It's a C1 zone property, and then there's residential behind it. And so the things that would actually allow the tenants that you could get that would generate income are not interested in C1 zoning. So we just, there's going to be a rezone no matter what we do. There is not going to be any effect at the moment. There's not going to be an additional building. There's not going to be changes to the impervious surface at the moment. Those things won't change.
But if there's a change to the use that might change traffic, we can't state whether we concur without knowing what that change is.
Yeah, I understand that, but
So I
Again,
think we
we've-
need that, right?
if based on the traffic that the Cherry House generated before, so there may be a change in the use, but there might not be a change in the traffic. Probably shouldn't be a change in the traffic because at its peak time, it generated quite a bit of traffic out of that area.
Well, again, but if there's a change in the use, we need to know what that change is so we can agree or disagree with you.
There won't be, well, I think we're in a circular argument here, but there's going to be a change in the type of tenant or the type of, of business that occupied the property. We don't know what that's going to be. There are different things that it can be. There could, in the existing buildings, there could be a business that's similar to the Cherry House that doesn't necessarily conform to the zoning that it has today. But we don't know what that is at the moment.
So essentially, they're going to have to show in their zoning map amendment case when it goes forth to the planning commission and then ultimately to the legislative body is that the ask and the change in zoning is appropriate for their area or the current zoning is inappropriate. So I think, and not speaking for them, is that they're saying that the current zoning is inappropriate because the operations that have been occurring there prior to zoning ever being established were already being done in that area. So, once again, I'm not making their case for them, but I think that's where the argument is going to hinge, is which zoning is going to be more appropriate. These conversations got started while my predecessor was still here, is that the IPD affords them opportunity to look at those different buildings and allowing some uses. I think that's going to be the adjoining property owner's concern, though, is that what potentially could go there. And I'm going to say that probably some of the adjoining property owner comments are going to hinge on that, especially looking at it where it backs up to Zale Smith Road, because that is mainly residential, and I think that's going to be a concern of theirs. So I think that's ultimately going to have to be heard at the Planning Commission, is their argument as to why the current zoning is inappropriate for what they've been doing on the property and what they foresee the uses on that property being. So it is difficult, but.
He's right. That's essentially the problem. The use that we had is grandfathered. Anything that, our perception is that, and we don't know this for sure, but our perception is that well, one, it's been hard to attract any tenant whatsoever in a commercial capacity that would go on a C1 property. So that being said, we're faced with having to rezone to something. And as Mr. Fisher pointed out, the conversations began early, and the suggestion, it doesn't really matter. We like the idea of the IPD because it does a variety of things. It provides flexibility. It doesn't really change a lot of the uses that we can envision for the property right now. We understand that there are a lot of uses that people might not want to see, that we might not want to see on that property. We haven't really gotten to that point yet, but it does provide the flexibility. It also provides protective buffering and so forth to the area that would, that hopefully would mitigate some of the concerns that people would have. And yeah, we're very familiar with the concerns about the effect on Zale Smith.
All right.
Well, I'm not
But
sure
I
that
understand.
I'm not sure that I'm satisfied as far as making a conclusion at this time, and we'll just have to look at it before the next meeting. But those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much.
And
Understand.
I have a copy of his thoughts.
Matt?
I mean, I don't have any comments for addressing now, but, it depends on the use or, what buildings are going to be removed or not removed or whatever the use is. So we'll just deal with that whenever the new tenants come in.
Okay, I love the GIS site, by the way.
Are all those,
Use it a lot.
are all those buildings currently addressed differently right now?
We have them as being separate numbers. I mean, I've spent a lot of time out there, like with car shows and stuff. I'm not sure if they're actually
Okay,
labeled that, like on the physical building themselves,
Yeah.
but it would be
They're not.
something that if there were different uses or different companies
Sure.
or different areas that people wanted to, we could, come up with some kind of plan as to like how to label them for
Clearly. Yeah,
for
clear,
911
yeah.
purposes,
so
but
that they would be easy to find in the event that there was any
yeah,
necessity.
because
Sure.
the property does have a lot of undulation on it, and like the back parts and the residences are sort of nestled in between those trees and things. So
Yeah.
but I don't see that being a problem now.
And then are there numbers available that if potential uses would dictate one building having multiple addresses, are there numbers available there for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, within that, I mean, we can probably work that out. I mean, there's a pretty wide range of numbers to give, depending on what is being used, or we could always suite it. If there's going to be like that big warehouse, if it got partitioned out where multiple companies were inside that one building. But
Yeah.
I really don't see it being a problem now. I mean, there has been a bunch of numbering out there currently that's probably not even being used necessarily.
I think that's the,
Yeah.
oh.
But
apparently
anyway,
that's true. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'd work with like LaGrange Fire and, dispatch to figure out whatever
Sure.
is going to be happening out there.
Yeah, and obviously we understand that's very important, but as long as there's a solution, that's
Yeah.
good.
All right. Mr. Ward, you don't have any comments, do you?
Yeah.
You do? Oh, sorry.
So again, if not knowing what the purpose of the building is going to be, they do all currently use on-site sewage disposal systems, septic systems on the property. I have 3 of the buildings with documentation for them. I think the others all they all predate before health department existence and on-site regs.
Oh.
So with that being said, with what the system is sized to accommodate, I was able to calculate total daily waste flow. How many gallons per day could each of these generate? Again, it's coming back to when and what kind of business is going to be in there, if it can handle that type of system. Now, upgrades can always be made. If a system fails, then we could add more lateral footage or systems to it in the future. But then I think Scott's going to comment too as far as what sewers would be able to come in and take that capacity on if need
Right.
be. So for the time being, yes, it is on septic systems. Best of my knowledge, they are working correctly. But again, until we know what goes in there, right.
And that
if
has
there's-
occupied a lot of our discussion, too. I mean,
Right, and if
that's
businesses are interested,
number
they're
one.
more than welcome to contact me and say, hey, this is what we're planning on doing. If it's going to be another restaurant, but it's going to have minimal, water usage, I can kind of tell them, okay, if this is people per day, employees per, week, theoretically, this is what you can accommodate. But there'll probably be some businesses that just are going to exceed in that. And if we need to add more capacity to it, then by all means, we can do that and go out there and review it.
Yes, sir.
So.
Understand. Thank you. Yep.
All right, on to the fire folks.
Keith Smith, LaGrange Fire and Rescue Department. I have no comments at this time.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So I'm Scott with LaGrange Utilities. So we are the current water provider for the property. And as Charlie alluded to, we do have sewers in the vicinity. We actually have gravity sewer on the property that's available. It's not in use, but it is there. It's on the side out towards 53, but towards the new Cherry Glen development. So we would have to look at, if there's some type of industrial process that goes on there, we would have to look at that very discreetly, or not discreet, but very
No.
intently. We do have a lot of regulation regarding industrial use, but at this point, you don't know what that's going to be. So
Yes, sir.
I will just say that sewer is available if you all want to talk to us.
Yeah, and I know we're, aware of that. We don't know all the particulars, but again, that's been part of our discussion. When you get to the point where we have to have more capacity, then, there's going to have to be, and if the sewers are available, there's going to be a way to get the sewage to the sewers. That's really going to be, and there's costs associated with that, all that we understand. It's something we'll have to work through.
Russ Rose, Oldham County Water. This is outside of our service area. It's in LaGrange Utilities.
All right. Yeah, do you want to read that one?
From Jason Richardson from KYTC. He said there's not much to say until we see a proposed development plan for the site, but in regard to preliminary comments, we can offer the following. All of the existing access points along Kentucky 53 may need to be moved or altered and/or eliminated based on the proposed site development plan. Proposed plan may also require widening of Kentucky 53 to provide left and/or right turn lanes at approved access locations if warranted. Should the proposed development generate more than 100 vehicle trips during a peak hour per the latest ITE trip generation estimates, then a full traffic impact study will be required, which is kind of going back to what he was saying is you don't know what you don't know, I guess.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, at this point, do you all have anything else you'd like to add before we?
No, sir.
All right. So at this point, we'll open it up to anyone in the audience that has public comment. Just simply raise your hand and we'll call on you. Just remember, keep your questions technical in nature. So we'll go ahead and start here with you. Just state your name and address for the record, slowly and clearly.
My name's Chris Williams. I live at 2003 Zale Smith Road. I've been a resident of Oldham County for about 8.5 years. I have a couple pictures. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, technical questions showing the pictures.
Are you computer savvy enough to?
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
He's only been here a week and a half, so this is his test to see if he's going to make it. Jay, is there a way for you to turn the volume up?
You and Anna are fine, but you're so good, you make a soft voice sound.
So I should quiet down.
While he's looking, While he's looking at this, in sake of time, because I know we're all pressed for time, I have a question that does involve the schools. Because I have technical questions for several members up here.
Okay.
If I could ask Mr. Williams a question. There is a bus stop for many kids who live in the Crystal Lake area at the corner of Crystal Lake Road and Zale Smith Road. Would an industrial park zoning on the west of Zale Smith Road, would that impact how the school looked at whether they would allow children to ride the bus or get on the bus there?
No, I mean, we provide transportation regardless. We would just possibly reroute the way the bus went to that site.
Okay, so that it wouldn't create any new safety questions for children
At
waiting
this
there
point,
across from-
no, and without knowing what's coming there, that would be reviewed by myself, our other director of safe schools, and our transportation department. So,
Okay. The next question is probably for Mr. Silman, because it has to do with roads. And what this shot you're looking at here is from a drone, and it is at the corner of Crystal Cove Road and Zale Smith looking to the south. What you can't really see on this picture is the grade of Zale Smith Road. There's a steep grade coming out of there. To the left, the second drive that you see there is my driveway going off of Zale Smith Road. And I can tell you, because of the grade there, we don't make right-hand turns going north on Zale Smith Road if there's traffic coming from the north, because you just never know if someone's going to come over that hill really fast, and we don't want to have people hit head-on, or we don't want to get T-boned. We want to have an escape. Is there any concern about the grading of Zale Smith Road, that if an industrial park were to move in the former Cherry House property, that you would have industrial traffic come out here, and would that create a safety issue? Would there have to be new road widening done there?
Well, it goes back to my comment that until we know what increases or decreases are being made, I can't answer that.
Okay, and this, just so you can see, this is a secondary look at, this is looking to the north from the edge of my property to the next property over, looking back. But this will give you an idea of what I see when I come out of my driveway, and why myself, and I have two teenage drivers, one is in college, one is a senior in high school, why we make sure that we preach extra safety, because that's what you're going to see when you look to the south on Zale Smith Road. What you're seeing here is the edge of the property. That's the former Cherry House property that's currently zoned residential. And then this is from the egress there of what it would look like if traffic were to leave that area now, looking back up the grade. And this is up the hill looking back down. And I specifically took this picture of a car coming up the hill because I wanted you to have a little bit of a better idea of when oncoming traffic would see traffic coming if we had an industrial park there. This is the last picture I wanted to show you from this. The county recently, I'm assuming it was a county, put gravel along Zale Smith Road to try to, it looks like they're trying to just kind of stabilize the road because they just did that great paving project on Zale Smith. And so I just kind of wanted to point that out for the technical review committee in case you were looking at whether Zale Smith Road was capable of handling traffic from an industrial park. I do have a water question, and I don't know if it's for Mr. Rose or who, but it appears to me that the current ponds on the property, that they feed into a waterway that feeds into the lake. Is there any concern about having what would be an industrial park and having runoff that would end up in the lake?
Well, that goes back to, so the Oldham County Engineering Department manages the stormwater. And again, that's something we look at, and there's ordinances regulating that on both the state and local level. But
Okay.
we've not
Until
been told
you
it's
know
an,
what's
we've
gonna go
not
on
been told
there.
it's an industrial park, so.
Okay. My last question might be for Ms. Barge or Mr. Fisher. Do you know if the residents of the new subdivision there on 53, were they alerted that this change might be coming? Or was it the fact that there's a little bit of a buffer zoning area between Cherry House and the subdivision? Did that mean that those people didn't have to be contacted?
So everyone within a 500 foot radius was notified. Now, some of those properties on the PVA site still say that they're owned by the developer. And if that hasn't been updated on the PVA's website, they may have not received a notification. It may have just gone to the developer. So everyone, we went over that pretty thoroughly because there's a lot of those houses are really close together. So there's I think we sent them to 77 different people for adjoining property owner notices.
Thanks. I just didn't know if because there was that little bit of a buffer zone,
Right.
it looks like, between the current property and that subdivision, whether that meant that they wouldn't have had to been alerted.
They're still within 500 feet, so they were
Okay.
notified. Yeah.
All right. That's it. Thank you for listening to my technical questions. I appreciate it.
All right. I just have a real quick question. I don't know if the applicant's representative would want to answer this or not, but in regards to any industrial traffic that would possibly be exiting onto Zale Smith. So I asked that question of the applicant and their representative the other day because there has been generally a lot of comments about Zale Smith Road. Their answer was that currently right now they don't have any ideas for development in that area and that they intend to remain, I believe, the residential uses that are back there. And then they've even talked about possibly creating a buffer in that zoning to keep residential on Zale Smith. But my question would be is there any sort of potential for, let's just say you make this entire thing an industrial park district, of any sort of industrial traffic exiting onto Zale Smith, or would everything come out? And you may not know yet because you don't know what the uses are, but I'm wanting to maybe put their fears at ease that they're going to have truck traffic and things coming out onto their area. So.
I'm Chris. Hey, Chris. Mike Craig. Nice to meet you, Mike.
Good to meet you. Thanks. Mr. Fisher, everything you're saying is correct. No, we don't know, but that idea came up at the neighborhood meeting, and we've had a lot of discussion about it since. I think that, we're going to have, to hone the whole idea before we get to the planning commission, but I believe even Mr. and Miss Whitehouse, Owen and Shirley, would prefer to leave a buffer there. So that would mean that the traffic would have to go out somewhere else.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to say today exactly what's going to occur or what we're going to be allowed to do for that matter. But yes, it's an idea we've discussed, and to be honest, it makes sense to me. That's all I can say about it at the moment.
Okay.
Might be dangerous, but that's where I am.
Okay. And just for transparency purposes, all of our cases that go before the Planning Commission have either a set of conditions of approval or binding elements that are associated with them. So within the course of the hearing, it may be even something we talk about prior to the hearing, but to put in there a binding element of no industrial traffic would be allowed to exit onto Zale Smith Road. That could be a potential binding element. There could be a binding element. We've talked about. Yeah.
But what Steve is saying is obviously they live there right now. They want to keep their driveways and be able to get in and out of their property.
So that's a
this would
potential
only-
binding.
And this is not for this committee, but then the question is, and we can talk about it later, is then why change the back half of the property from residential?
Right.
But
But
thank you for listening to my question.
But yeah, so I mean, if we can calm that fear of possibly no industrial traffic coming out on that property, or even uses, we've had conversations with them about specific uses within the IPD that maybe wouldn't be allowed. There's other, zoning changes we've done where we put stipulations in there that certain types of uses wouldn't be allowed. Same thing; those could be put into binding elements or conditions of approval. So just for transparency, I wanted to mention that. So
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
thank you. All right, who else would like to? Mr. Allen?
Jim Allen, 1416 Oldham View Drive. I live on Crystal Lake. A couple technical questions. I noticed that the R2 version of this property is about half of the entire lot. Is there any ability to upgrade the C1 to light industrial and not affect the R2 rating?
Do you have a note?
Looks like the part towards Zale Smith is R2, and there's a line that goes through it, creates the Cherry House is C1. They're looking at changing. You're looking at changing all of the property to light industrial. Okay.
IPD.
IPE. Okay.
which would encompass any use within all of the commercial districts as well as anything within the I-1 as
Okay.
well. So IPD allows them the flexibility
Okay.
to be able to have all of those.
So then, let me ask, this is my concern. By being able to rezone this, that means that any of the neighbors who are trying to object to whatever goes in that spot that's in the R2 section now would basically have to make their arguments based on the IPD, not on the R2, right?
If the zoning change goes through, yes.
So this basically robs R2 residents of being able to use the R2 as a reason to not put a particular thing on that site? That's true, right?
Well, so like I mentioned earlier, essentially at the zoning map amendment, they're going to have to argue that the current zoning is inappropriate. Opposition would come in and argue that the current zoning that's on the property now is appropriate, based off of,
Okay, but if they did that, if they were able to get that, then when they do the building plans, then the argument would be all light industrial, not, they wouldn't be arguing R2.
correct.
Okay. Okay, and then I heard that the Cherry Glen and the Cherry House people have been sharing some kind of rights on the pond. Is there some kind of, maybe Mr. Sullivan can answer this? They were using the pond, or were going to clean it out later, or some other kind of arrangement?
Yeah, I think I was provided an agreement between Pulte Homes and the owners of that pond, that Pulte Homes is responsible for some type of remediation at the end of construction of their development.
Okay, so the current owners will be responsible for maintaining that pond and be careful, and the silt that comes out of that pond and goes into Crystal Lake?
I think they would be.
Yeah, okay. And there's no intention right now to remove the pond or change it? We don't know whether the pond will move, right? Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any technical comment? Yes, sir.
Yes, Justin Paget, 1810 Glen Eagles Way. I'm in the front of the Glen Eagles neighborhood facing the old Cherry House properties. I guess my concern would be being one of the residents close to it, and especially on the right off Highway 53, where probably more of the consumer end of traffic and stuff would be. So I would imagine if there's any future development in that area, that's where we're talking additional light, noise pollution, stuff like that. Not as familiar with the zoning stuff. Is there any special buffers or considerations or anything switching to this to help ensure that, especially because we're on a hill, we can look down and see it. So to help us not, I mean, on traffic is one thing, but I'm looking at some of the other things that could go in with this industrial. Because I see industrial and I think more factories and manufacturing kind of stuff, as opposed to what I'm sure some people would like to see is something more of the commercial, something that families want. Again, not a technical question, but I'm worried about buffers and lines and stuff between whatever this would be and us being right on the other side of the road.
You want to take that?
So they will have to submit a lighting plan as part of the development. And so something with our lighting plan is that they use shielding because they don't want to, or we as a county don't want to create more light pollution than necessary. And then the IPD zoning allows for C1 through C4. So it's primarily commercial. And the applicant may or may not decide to take some or all of the industrial items off the table as part of those binding elements we talked about. It's up to them to decide, come to us with that, and then to agree if the planning commission or whoever, decides that they may agree to taking especially certain industrial items off the counter. So the word industrial is not a complete misnomer, but it's primarily commercial in that zoning. But they could, currently with the IPD, they could do some of those industrial uses. But it's the light industrial, not the heavy industrial, if you want to add in there.
And once again, kind of an answer to that question is going to be dependent upon their uses, which we don't know yet, on whether or not there would be the need for any additional lighting from what Cherry House already originally had, which I'm guessing we're probably lighting in the parking lot, lighting on the buildings, things like that. But like she talked about, there's shielding requirements. There's we even had one commercial development just down here on 53 that some of the neighbors across the street talked about the sign out front. And if, a lot of commercial places want to keep their sign on all the time for advertisement, there's things in the course of the hearing that, can the light be turned off at night after a certain hour? Can it be dimmed of any sort? So, but that's very dependent upon uses. So it's at this stage, something hard to do, but building permit time, definitely there would be possible landscape requirements, parking lot, standards as far as having to meet vehicle use, landscape buffer area requirements as far as a number of bushes or trees, whatever that might be, in addition to lighting standards.
Yeah. Because I know also being right on 53, I'd be curious to see what the roadway might have to expand because that would eat into my lot. So,
yeah.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else on this case? Yes, sir.
Brian Warner, live at 1706 Azale Smith Road. Mrs. Barge actually answered this question for me via email, but I'd like to say it out loud just so my neighbors could hear it as well. One of the reasons that we were given as far as why they wanted to rezone the residential to industrial was for concerns that if they needed to make improvements or changes to the sewer system, that they wouldn't be allowed to run that system from an industrial property through residential. So I just wanted to get confirmation on that, if there was anything preventing that, if that needed to be the case.
The LaGrange Utilities does not have any regulation that prohibits industrial from going through residential, but it would be something we would have to look at. We based on the strength of wastewater, we may require pretreatment. There could be, but until we know what's coming, we really don't know. But we do not have regulation saying that it cannot go through.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this case? Going once, going twice? All right. So on this case, if you are notified as an adjoining property owner and you're here today, oh, sorry. I've been corrected. We're not done yet.
Okay, so James Stetson and Jessica Stetson at 1711 Zale Smith Road in LaGrange submitted their comments. So one thing that they're worried about, which this has been mentioned, they had questions about how the stream empties into Crystal Lake, and they're worried about the stormwater control there, which we've already addressed. They are also worried that there's already an abundance of land within the county with good proximity to I-71 and rail access, zoned for business commercial. So they're wondering why this needs to be rezoned. We kind of addressed why it's being rezoned. And then this is the only property that borders Zale Smith Road that's currently zoned anything other than residential is currently on the corner of Highway 53. And they're asking if it's incompatible with the surrounding properties. Is that something that would be addressed at Planning Commission? The incompatibility?
Yeah.
That would be determined at Planning Commission. And then they're concerned about the traffic on Zale Smith Road, which we've already talked about. We don't know what traffic would be. So until we know the uses, there can't be the traffic study completed. But that was his comments.
All right. Okay, I think now we're done. So if you were notified as an adjoining property owner for this case, if the applicant does intend to move forward with the zoning map amendment, their next step would be the Planning Commission. Those meetings are held the fourth Tuesday of every month at 9 a.m. So today is actually our filing deadline. So if they intend to move forward, they could file, potentially be on the January agenda for that, or February. But once again, if you're notified as an adjoining property owner, you'll receive notification for this hearing as well. It will be posted to our website, usually about the end of the month. holidays this month. We'll see where that lays, but definitely by the first of the month, those are usually on our website. They're posted in the Oldham area in accordance with state law, and when we have to post those, as well as you'll see a sign posted on the property as well. So, so if they intend to go forward and you were notified as an adjoining property owner, you'll be notified again as well. So, so that'll conclude that first case. We will now move to our second case, which is TRC 24-018. That's for the Estates of Ballard Woods, Section 2, for a preliminary subdivision plan, a revised plan for 95 lots. And I see Mr. Swansburg approaching. So, welcome.
Make sure my phone is off. Mr. Fisher, members of the committee, good morning. Actually, at this point, we're in the afternoon, aren't we? So,
Yes.
1:40, well past noon at this point. Good afternoon, everybody. Mike Swansburg, 117 West Main Street, right here in LaGrange. I have the honor of standing up here to say that I represent JS Real Estate, which is the applicant in this case, and that's all I'm going to talk about today, and let the two other individuals who are here to represent this particular proposal today talk more about the technical issues and answer any questions there might be. First is Walsham, who's representative of JS Real Estate, who is here, as well as Bob Vincent, who is the engineer on this project. I'm always happy, of course, to answer any questions that I can, but at this point, I'm going to turn it over to them and let them present and answer any questions that you all might have. So, Mr. Fisher, thank you.
Wow, thank you.
Good afternoon. Bob Vincent Engineering and Land Surveying, 1000 Cherrywood Place, Suite 200, LaGrange. I've got an overhead, need some technical assistance.
No, Jay will switch it over there, and Mr. Hine is there in case you need assistance. He has done a great job so far today. There you go.
Appreciate your time today. This will be brief. We are currently approved for 119 lots that have not been constructed in what is the Estates of Ballard Woods. And then on the southern side down here is known as Ballard Glen Section 3. There are 44 lots in the Ballard Glen Section 3. Those are small lots, and they were primarily going to be served by an on-site treatment system, a drip system, similar to what was installed in Ballard Glen Section 1 and 2. There are 75 lots in the Estates of Ballard Woods. Those are all 1 acre or greater lots and will be served by standard septic systems. So we are asking for the approval of 83 lots. So we're reducing the number of lots by 36, and those lots will range in size from 1 to 5.8 acres. The main reason why we're here today is because we are requesting that we revise the road construction from curbs, catch basins, and storm drains to an open ditch concept. And all the lots will be a minimum of 1 acre, which is very similar to the open ditch concept is what most subdivisions in Oldham County are constructed with that are 1 acre or greater. This will give us a total of 199 lots in Ballard Woods. This proposed Estates of Ballard Woods Section 2 and the rework of Ballard Glen Section 3. So under the regs, when you have 200 lots, you're required to have 2 entrances, and we're not proposing to do that. That's it.
All right, thank you. Anybody else from your team have anything? Good? All right. We'll start with Ms. Barge.
Okay, and I can go ahead and hand you all the comments. The second one is Jim's comments. Okay. So the first thing is verify that all abutting streets or private roads have location names and dimensions, specifically the right-of-way for Ballard Ridge Court. Include names for proposed roadways rather than Road A, generic placeholder names, and you can coordinate with Matt Toller over here to make sure that those names are appropriate. Review the adjoining property owners' addresses and names. There's a couple misspellings of names on there and address issues, so I've included those there. Note if there's any access points designated for use by construction vehicles. Verify all locations of utilities have been indicated on the plan indicate areas of substantial trees, including a description of their type and sizes, indicate lakes, ponds, marshes, wetlands, and soil types, note whether there are any areas of steep slope, or if there's not, note that, and then note any natural features that might affect the design of the subdivision, note the location of the nearest offsite drainage facility, and then note the following site statistics, and I've had those listed out for you, and then indicate whether the applicant will request any waivers or variances. So that is all.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
My mic on. So serving schools would be Locust Grove Elementary School, East Oldham Middle School, Oldham County High School. When we run all of the capacities, net growth of that 83 lots would be 20 students. And so based on the numbers and all of the factors that come into this, one, I always have to say that no, it is not adequate capacity for the district, but based on the capacity agreements that we have with the county, it would net 24 a year.
All right.
Okay, so some of my comments are, they reflect the engineering design for stormwater and detention and other aspects of design, but, and you've already actually, you're aware of these because you were approved for Estates of Ballard Woods, so there's a slight redundancy in this, but, and I did want to just start off by, I guess, reviewing, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. So we know that Estates of Ballard Woods, Section 1, lots 1 through 12, is nearing completion. And what you're talking about is the remainder of an Estates of Ballard Woods preliminary plan. What we called, or what you called Estates of Ballard Woods, Section 2, lots 71 through 82 and 93 through 95, was recently approved by our office for construction, but you're going to, I guess, resubmit those with your roadside ditch plan, where they were previously approved with the curb and gutter. And the roadside ditch is going to take over, be the typical section for the remainder of the development. And then as we look down at the south, you're proposing the portion of Ballard Glen, which was on the west side of North Fork, Curry's Fork, and putting that into Estates of Ballard Woods, and that becomes the lots 83 through 92 of Estates of Ballard Woods. So as typical, we got more than an acre of land disturbance, so as you would have designed any of Estates for Ballard Woods, this new section will be required to follow the ordinance for post-construction stormwater runoff, construction site runoff, impervious surface requirements, and with the separation from Ballard Glen, I was curious if, because Ballard Glen Section 2 was platted with the right-of-way to extend and cross over North Fork Curry's Fork, that is essentially eliminated with this new alignment. Is there an intent to come back and revise that plat to eliminate that stub? Because the county doesn't need that public right-of-way extending towards the waterway. You don't have to answer now, just, it's in the letter. I didn't know if you had an answer. Of course, you'll still be required to get your KYR 10 from the Division of Water. At the same time, you're getting your permit from us for stormwater. Any impact to blue line streams or other jurisdictional waters would require the Division of Water and Army Corps permitting as usual. It looks like the existing Ballard Ridge Court, that where the stormwater all runs to the west into the existing or the current detention basin, that's not an issue, but at the intersection there where it's going to stub off the existing curb and gutter, we'll just need to review with you and make sure that how the stormwater transitions from the roadside ditch to that curb and gutter gets captured appropriately, because there's, just with the vertical curvature, it's not there's potential for it to exit. Does that make sense, Bob? Yeah, so we'll coordinate that with you. The cul-de-sac that's currently shown through the new proposed area appears to be longer than the subdivision regulations allow for a cul-de-sac area. So I think you'd either have to add an eyebrow or something there or request a waiver, one of the others. I think maybe the most critical item that we've discussed, and we've discussed this at the pre-application meeting and other times, is when Estates of Ballard Woods came through Planning Commission in late 18, early 2019, there was a traffic impact study performed. And at that time, of course, since some of the traffic was allowed or shown going to Ballard Glen Parkway over the proposed bridge at the time, the trip distribution was much different. So now, with the elimination of that bridge, all the trips from Estates of Ballard Woods and Ballard Woods subdivision are going to be entering Kentucky Highway 22 from Ballard Vista Drive. So, and I think I've discussed with your traffic engineer, Diane Zimmerman, that she is working on a traffic study to reflect the current proposed distribution. And we'll just have to review that when we get that from Diane and review that ahead of the Planning Commission meeting, understanding there were concerns at the time with the safety of the curve at that entrance and the volume of traffic. We'll just have to re-review that. That's all I had.
Right. Mr. Toller.
The only real issue I see with this is on this Ballard's Woods Parkway, that only was that where it says Street A. That little section was the only thing that we numbered or addressed off of Ballard. It says Ballard Woods Parkway. And then this Ballard Glen Parkway, I have that as Ballard Estates Drive. I guess we'll have to look at those plats because I think that was going to be a continuation of that Ballard Glen Parkway from that other phase that was going to go across with the bridge. So like this whole bottom section, I think that I had started to address based on what that old plan was going to be. So we'll just have to maybe revisit some of those other plats just in case. I don't think that there's anybody who's physically has an address on that. So I don't think from a homeowner's standpoint it'll be changed, but I think we probably should just look at those old plats and just try to either re-record them with the correct name, and then we can, manage whatever we want to based on, because it might be easier to have that long cul-de-sac going south to have its own road name on that three-way stop right there. But that's really, other than that, we'll just give the numbers like we normally do and just approve the names.
So we have already done our preliminary subdivision site evaluation. I'm pleased that the lot acres are going up from more than 1.0 acres, so it gives me a little more space to work with. Once again, whenever a house is proposed to be built or constructed, I'll go back out there, do a on-site sewage site evaluation, determine where septic system is going to be installed on the property. So it's just going to be notifying me of if those days come and making those site visits, determining where those systems will be located.
Chief?
As far as fire protection, just as make sure the hydrants meet ordinance and address locations has always been previously done.
As far as LaGrange Utilities, this property is within LaGrange Utilities sewer service area. We have no infrastructure there to serve the property, hence Charlie comes in. So I just wanted to comment that.
Russ Rose, Oldham County Water. So we have not looked at any overall water construction plans at this time. I know we've looked at it in pieces in the past. My only comment would be we still want, before it's completely built out, we'd want to have a connection to the north to Blakemore Lane, and then on the south, the plan was to connect Ballard Glen with this for water. So might go back to that right-of-way area. We might still need part of that for easement purposes to run the water line. You know. So, other than that, that's all my comments.
All right. Does anyone have any public comment for this case? Yes, sir.
Hello, Doug Kramer, 4604 Clark Hurst Circle, Ballard Glen. I am the association president of Ballard Glen and am representing my community here. Couple questions, and I think Russ just started to answer one of them. Ballard Glen was originally platted for like 5 expansions, or proposed for like 5 expansions that cover most of this proposed area. So I believe most likely the utilities would have been sized for that initially. They are in fact stubbed out where the road ends, where Ballard Glen Parkway ends. So my question was, will there be construction across, under, through the creek, over the creek to get to this property, to extend utilities from us to this property or any portion of this property, or will it all come from the Ballard Woods side? You sort of started answering some of that. You
Whenever
don't know.
possible, we like to create those redundancy loops for both developments.
Okay. And that may also extend to potentially the electric, which there's no KULGE person here, I guess, but that is a question I had. So we had, when this property was originally supposed to be part of Ballard Glen, I'm sorry if there's too many Ballards in this whole discussion. Ballard Glen, there was initial construction to build that proposed bridge across the creek. That was all aborted. Land was supposedly put back to original condition. It's a disaster right now. No way representing its initial condition. I'm just concerned that any future construction in support of this would lead to further disruption of the creek and the area and all that, because where the stub road ends and where the utilities currently end is at least 100 yards to the creek of what's now grass and disturbed rock and temporary gravel road that's been partially buried and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I'll just speak to, as far as any construction access
That is another question, is will there be any construction access to this proposed from our side, because there is an access easement to that property from us?
Well, that would have to be answered by the developer or his engineer, but if they did choose to do that, they would have to get appropriate permitting, and to go through that flood hazard area and perennial blue line stream, they would have to have appropriate permitting.
Yeah, the access easement is easily done on foot, but if you're planning to take bulldozers across the creek, that's a whole different thing. Okay. Also, I'd like to comment that the map of this proposed area that I got in our mailer is grossly inaccurate as regard to the parcel or the GIS information. It shows that this, I think it contained 2 parcels. It showed that it was most of the common space of my neighborhood was part of this parcel. The whole outlined area in red, not here, the map that I got in my notice letter.
I think this is what you're talking about?
Yes.
I mean, this was just what the PVA had as that parcel number. So when instances like this, we just go by what the line work that the PVA has, whether that's survey grade or not.
Yeah, it's, as far as this is concerned, it's definitely not, because that parcel was like this, maybe? All of that is my neighborhood. All of this here. Just some inaccuracies to perhaps come back and do research and clean up at some point.
Yeah, we'll look
That's
at it.
all I have, though.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that has questions in regard to this case? Yes, sir.
Sorry. Nicholas George, 3800 Ballard Woods Court, Smithfield, Kentucky, part of Ballard Woods. I would, again, like clarification on this. Because what I see, is it stopping right here? Or in this image, it seems to come much further down. But where would construction vehicles come through to do all this? Would it come through Ballard Woods neighborhood?
Do you want to answer that? Do you have any other questions?
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. You can come on up. Okay. Is there anybody else that needs comments for this one? All right. You're up.
My name is Walt Shum, 3701 West Highway 22, Crestwood, Kentucky 40014. I'm the developer of Ballard Woods under the name of JS Real Estate, and previously redeveloper of Ballard Glen sections 1 and 2 under the name of 71 Land Group. In respect to continuation of utilities, they are going to be accessed through the easements primarily of Ballard Woods. Potentially would have to work with the utility companies on the Ballard Glen side. That remains to be determined. In terms of the addresses, we'll be happy to work on road names and addresses for the county. And in respect to the GIS map, I worked late in the year with Barb Winters at PVA to clean that up because I've been paying Ballard Glen's open space taxes for the last couple of years, and I figured they'd want that. So I took maps up to her, and we worked all the parcels out as they should be on GIS, and it obviously did not hit that diagram, and I don't know the date of that diagram, but PVA is aware that there were mislabeled parcels in the GIS. Any other question?
Oh, the construction vehicles?
Construction vehicles, as they do now, will come primarily through Ballard Woods for the roads.
Right. Thank you.
We do not anticipate bringing road construction vehicle, only utility, potentially utility construction through Ballard Glen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes this hearing. Same as the first one, if you were notified as an adjoining property owner for this case, you'll receive notification again. I do believe this is one they've already applied to go to Planning Commission in January, so that hearing will be the fourth Tuesday in January, which is the 25th, maybe? Something like that. Fourth Tuesday of the month at 9 a.m. So thank you very much. We'll call the next case forward, and that will be TRC 24-019 for Sundance at 5600 Fiba Lane in Crestwood. I'll ask the applicant to come forward first and give a brief presentation. I'm going to go a little out of order this time because our health department gentleman has to leave for a doctor's appointment. So I'm going to let him make his comments, and then I know there's going to be some questions about septic, and so I'm going to let anybody that may have a question that's an adjoining property owner regarding septic ask those questions so that he can be here to answer those. So, little change of plans, but Charlie says he's special, so yes.
Well, I guess we can start while we are pulling up the map. So my name is Alma Simic, and I'm co-owner with my husband and our partners of the property at 5600 Fiba. Is this better?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'll start over. So my name is Alma Simic, and I need to tell my address, I guess. It's 9915 Constantine Circle, Prospect, Kentucky 40059. I've been Oldham County resident for over 25 years. My husband and I purchased this property 10 years ago with the intention to develop it with partners. Since both of us are architects, it took us some time to go through many, many options. And it's DRC form. Yeah, if you can. And then it's a plat or something like that. Development plan. That should be the one. Yeah. So this is the plan we developed and we would like to develop. Here with me is my partner in project, Mr. Lowe, and our civil engineer, Mr. Nouri, and they'll be available to answer any questions that are pertaining to them. The development that we propose is a small one, relatively in comparison with what we see regularly. It's 38 lots, and the size of lots vary from 1 acre to 2 acres. Primarily, lots were designed to fit the configuration contour lines of the land. This is a very nice, beautiful piece of property that has a lot of up and downs, has 2 ponds, has ravines, and we try to follow the most logical way to lay out the lots and roads, not just the lots. So the main road connects Fiber Lane and Carpenter Drive, and then we have 2 cul-de-sacs. We have several lots. They are connected to the main road with the private driveway. And we intend to keep and also enhance both ponds, and in general try to fit to the environment as is. Our electrical lines will be underground. We do not have, we're going to have septic system for each lot, and I guess that would be the basic information that I can give at this time, and we are available for any questions.
All right, thank you. Charlie, I'll let you go ahead and make your comments, and then I'll open it up to the public.
All right, so here's a letter from you all. This is the report from the preliminary subdivision site evaluation that we did back in 23. Yes, these properties all do meet the 1 acre county minimum ordinance for anything being serviced by on-site sewage, septic. I did a preliminary subdivision site evaluation, which is documented on that paperwork back in 23. That is just a random sampling of the entire subdivision. We just started digging holes and moved 50 yards and dug a hole, moved 50 yards and dug a hole. At that time, we have no idea where plots of land are going to be. We knew where the overall subdivision was located as far as roads, corner lots, things. It's just a general interpretation of what to expect and overall feel of the subdivision. Findings pretty much general consistency with that area of the county. There is some shallow massive soil with some other shallow restrictive horizons. There is a presence of groundwater, but these things can all be addressed when we do a specific site evaluation for every property. If there are 38, I know this might say 39, if or when a house is to be constructed, I will go out there to that lot and determine the exact location of the lateral field to be installed. That is dependent upon site variables with topography, the number of bedrooms that the residence plans on having, if there's any of the outbuildings, pools, pool houses, whatever you can think of, I have to account for these things in the future. Reassurance, my role being at the health department is public and environmental health. I don't want to talk to anybody about their septic system ever again once it's been installed. So, I've been doing this for 13 years this June. I will make a visit to every property that's been determined. That won't happen until a house is proposed and to be built. So these won't be done all at once. It's going to be, well, depending upon how many permits per year they're issued. But I will make a specific site evaluation for every property once it's determined to be constructed. And that will all follow with, you have to have a site evaluation, then you have to have a permit with a certified septic installer. That will then generate a building release letter that I will send to Planning and Zoning's office so then they can have a permit to do construction on the property. I am first and last. I'm usually your first public servant to make foot on the property because we got to know where something's going that's going to be underground before you try to put your house or your driveway on top of it. We're not making those mistakes anymore. And then I will usually be the last inspector to come out there because your sewer is not installed, your sewer with your plumbing is usually installed last after the house is framed and built, and then it can be connected to your septic system. So all in all, I'll be making 2 site visits to every property, again, as they are being built and constructed. Hopefully I just answered everyone's questions and I don't have any questions.
Okay, before he has to cut out, I think I saw you here. Yes, please. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so this is just to open it up to any questions that you may have for him before he has to cut out.
Yes. Ballooning.
Yeah. All right. My name is Ryan King, 5710 and 5700 Bible Lane. We just bought the property next to us, hoping to not have this happen, but here it is. So we are separated by a little road, our driveway and a little road, and pretty much all the septic runoff. We just want to make sure that the septic, as it runs off through the lateral lines, because there is a big problem with drainage coming from that property. It just washed out my driveway. I just want to make sure we aren't the recipient of the filth from, this.
Oh, no, definitely valid. Water runs downhill and
Yeah, and it runs
constant.
right down 5700 to 5710, all downhill.
Right, and that will be addressed when we do the site evaluation itself. I'll be looking at those contours because we're not installing lateral fills in any convex type area where water is funneling towards.
Right.
Curtain drains, which are similar to French drains that go around your house. You can install a curtain drain, which is a subsurface way to collect groundwater heading towards the lateral fill that's then daylighted or run to surface out on the property somewhere else. Man, I got 17 years left to do this job, and I don't want to say
I know
need
you
everyone's
do.
septic system in the subdivision the last 17
You've been to my
years.
house doing this.
Yes. So no, I take great pride in what I'm doing. And again, when I tell people I don't want to speak to them, it's not to be rude, but I want to make sure that whatever is done, I'm spending people's money. I don't know how much, but I don't want it to be wasted or frivolous or done anything incorrectly. I don't want problems.
Right.
So yes, those will all be addressed. Those all between the drainage and contours and things all have certain setback distances by code with the KRS involving on-site sewage disposal. So there'll be numerous things that I will have to take a wide gaze and look upon to make sure we're avoiding any of those issues.
Right. And normally what I understand like you have septic. I lived in a neighborhood that was once a farm and then it became a neighborhood, but it wasn't as big as this. And I just worry about being right next to that 38 new bathroom. Well, actually it's probably 3 bathrooms per, how many people? We don't know how
And it's really bedrooms. It's people flushing toilets, not toilets to be flushed. 4
Yeah.
people flush 1 toilet, how many times? 4. 4 people flush 4 toilets, how many times? 4. So bedroom size is going to be the determining factor of all of this. So the larger the house, the more bedrooms you might have. But again, I code books black and white. I can't tear it in half.
Right.
I follow it and I will keep on it.
All right.
Very discreetly.
Fair enough. Well, I think you need to go to the doctor.
Anybody else have any questions
No,
for
I'm-
Mr. Ward? Yes.
Keep rolling on me. You got
a couple more minutes, right?
15 minutes.
701 Fible Lane. Can you hear me okay? I'd like some clarification on, as I understand it, you have to have an acre for a septic system. Is that an acre of usable land? Or if you had a lot that's an acre and a pond covered half that lot, would that be suitable for a septic system?
The pond is included with it. It's an acre as it stands. When they wrote the ordinance in May of 1989, it didn't really have the word green space associated with it. It was that any new property deemed to be served by on-site sewage disposal must be an acre in minimum size. The pond will have setback distance. So that'll be one of the things when I do the site evaluation. I'll have the house location, I'll have the pond's location, and stay certain distances off of that to avoid any groundwater contamination to that pond.
Okay.
So short answer, no, it doesn't account for it, but there are things on the other end where I have to keep setback distances from it and be aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name's Arna Davidson, 5701 Fible Lane. We live right across the street from the proposed subdivision, and in 2013, our septic failed, and we were required to install a direct discharge system. And it was due, the site was found unsuitable for any conventional sewage system. Yeah, due to lack of sufficient soil depth.
Yes.
So our concern is, I know, things are different, but we're right across the street, and you won't know until all these lots are put in and sold, what if conventional sewage systems, won't work? And maybe everybody has to have a direct discharge or...
That's what we're going to try to avoid. I never want to see a subdivision with 100% surface discharge systems. Now, those systems are permitted through the Division of Water. I'm the guy that does anything that discharges beneath the ground. If you can't go beneath the ground, you go onto the surface of the ground. That's Division of Water. They have permits. Division of Water allows for that. I'm going to try hardest that I can to avoid that type of situation. Again, it's going to be very specific to site locations and soil quality and characteristics. But the idea being is when you all are cutting the roads in, stockpile that first 12 inches of topsoil. Don't just spread it out everywhere, put it in a stockpile. So if we do have a shallow installation system, we have cover soil that can be placed on top of it. So whatever ease of mind I can tell you, I'm going to try and avoid those as much as I can. But again, with your instance being a repair, and I'm spending your money, why would I put another subsurface system in and you're going to call me in 10, 15 years, and then ultimately this is what we're going to be doing again? I don't waste time and money on people.
For a direct discharge system, is just an acre required also for that?
Well, whenever Division of Water has any new construction for a plot, they would like to see it be a minimum of 1 acre. Now, if it's anything that it's a repair, like if your instance, you had less than an acre, but you're needing a repair, then they don't take that into consideration. But the biggest thing with Division of Water is there has to be somewhere on the property where surface water is funneled, collected, and then drains out to somewhere that eventually goes through the watershed to, Jim, what is this, Curry's Creek, or Floyd's? It's Floyd's
I
Fork?
think it's Curry. It's a little of both, I think.
Right. So there would have to be a very specific point of discharge where that water would keep going to, not just bloop, bloop, bloop out on the ground and sits and saturates an area. It has to go and maintain somewhere.
But again, in 1 acre is acceptable to have a direct discharge system?
For Division of Water, yes. If there's nothing that can be done, and I'm not one of those, well, let's do it just because we can. Again, I don't want to come back. And a surface discharge system, it's literally what MSD is doing in Floyd's Fork, but it's just your house. It's not 100,000 people that are contributing to it. I want to avoid those as much as I can. Well, will there be 1 or 2 in there? I can't tell you until I get out there and figure out what we're going to do. But I want to try to get as many conventional subsurfing discharge systems as we can for this subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Chris Billings, 5616 Bible Lane. Our property adjoins the proposed development. Had question on specifically about the septic for a couple different lots on their map. 28, 29, 30, and 31. So currently, where 30 is, there is an area that abuts our driveway. When we first moved in 16 years ago, that was basically wetlands. So when it rains, you get a huge accumulation of water on that area. So concerned about those septic systems and what they might do, how far back they'd have to be set, because that runs from there into a creek that runs back behind our property and the other properties adjoining that. So a little bit of concern about that in terms of how that would be set up to mitigate that.
Site evaluation. When the house is being proposed, I would go out there. You got me boots in the ground looking at it. I would basically go over the entire property, find what is the best area to put this septic system on the property. I'm avoiding drainage ways and wet areas as much as I can.
Okay.
I wish I could do every site evaluation from September through March to see how wet everything has gotten.
You want to see a picture?
I'm sure it's stomping puddles in the pig like Pego does. So
6 inches deep.
Yes, that area, I'll see it. I will avoid it. Again, I've been doing this for almost 13 years. I don't want problems.
Well, I'm concerned, especially with 30. They not only hit that area, they also hit an area that there's a creek in the property that when the land got cleared, they filled in the end of the creek.
Yeah.
So now that area is blocked off from getting to the culvert. And so I'm concerned about really that property and how it would affect.
I can't tell you now.
Yeah, okay.
But
fair enough.
Site evaluation will be performed.
Yep.
I will be there, and then that's when I'll make that determination.
Okay.
And all those factors you mentioned, I promise you, I will look at every one of them, determine the best location to put that lateral fit.
So for a potential homeowner, if they buy that lot, they won't know if they can build until
You got to go through me.
after.
You got
Okay.
you. If you're purchasing that property, you and I are
I'm
meeting
not.
there. Nothing's been touched. I'm just saying as an example.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
meeting whoever the buyer, the
Yeah.
builder, and installer, getting an excavator, backhoe out there, digging test holes to say, okay, where is your house going? Where is your driveway? Where are utilities? Oh, we have this really wet spot over here. We need to avoid that. Oh, we have a creek or stream with a drainage ditch. There's a setback for off of that. The site evaluation is going to answer all your questions.
Okay.
But you're not going to have those answers.
You don't
I'm
know
gonna
till
have them.
afterwards. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I believe he has to cut out now.
If anyone else, by all means, please.
Charlie, I want to just make one. I want to make one comment also while he's heading down here because it's relevant to the septic systems. And Mr. Davidson, you asked about ponds and the 1 acre. I don't think there's anything we can really do with the existing ponds, but one thing I'd like to note is the detention basins aren't shown on here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you have to reserve some space for detention basins, and if you're trying to shove a house, a driveway, a septic system, and now potentially a reserved area for all or some of a detention basin on some of these lots, we really need to look at increasing the lot size of a couple of these for just best management of this land. So Charlie, I'd like to coordinate more with you when we get this plan with basin locations on it so we can see what lots are appropriate and what lots might need to be larger to, again, add something that's being designed, not something that's existing. So
Yes, that would be like a green space that's present but not available. In that case, that detention retention pond would have a setback distance on it, so it's dead space to me. So yes, if it's on the property, does it count towards the 1 acre minimum? Yes, but I'm staying away from it, and that might be the determination that that lot might need to be the property line fudged left or right to increase that lot size to, again, to accommodate everything. It's always much. Yes, sir.
Laszlo Simoni, Laszlo, 5201 Robertson Court, Crestwood, resident for 20 years in the neighborhood, 25 here in the county. Just sort of a general question to better clarify for us. I know in speaking previously with you, you had gone out and done some assessments randomly, and you felt like it would at least maintain a standard septic layout. If you can educate us a little bit, if those may fail once, so those won't be done again until the property lines are laid out and this is progressing. If the standard fails, what would be then the next type of system? Could you kind of
That would be going to more into, okay, you would have a fill and wait example. If you hauled in 20 to 30 truckloads of soil, let it sit there for a year, reevaluate it a year later, install lateral fill into it. You could have a mound system. If you still had 12 inches of soil before you hit restrictive horizon, then you could install a mound on it instead of a subsurface discharging system. It's above the surface, but it's covered with soil and grass. It looks like someone parked 2 Studebakers and covered it with dirt.
Sure.
So there are other options before having to go surface discharging route where we can keep, not conventional, but more in secondary pretreatment and other, I don't want to say experimental, they're all approved, but something can be done. I'm not the roadblock to prevent anything from being built on a property. You can solve it with enough, but there are other options that would be available.
The other question would be on the western tier, again, very sloped areas, and I think in the engineering write-up as well, there's probably 7-8 lots with 30-plus degree slopes. As you said, that's not necessarily a good fit for systems, and that's probably the only place that really, a lot of the trees have already been cleared out. There's a lot of trees remaining on the western properties. Do the trees then, if it does have major vegetation, trees and so forth, does that need to be cleared out in order to fit the system?
Sometimes yes, not always. You can snake lateral lines in the woods in between trees. Trees are double-edged sword. Roots find the water in the lateral field and they could clog it up, but they could also be drinking it and helping it. The slope, depending upon the degree of slope, will determine sidewall to sidewall installation. So if you have a lateral line and you have a lateral line, You don't want this one over that one with your normal 8-foot setback because it could bleed down to the top of the other piece. So that slope will be accounted to a further setback distance from sidewall to sidewall with lateral lines. Now, the trees and such, I am an environmentalist. I'm not a tree hugger. I know how to make an omelet. You got to break some eggs. But as little as vegetation as we can remove, I always try to tell homeowners and builders, do not go in there and grenade the lot. You start cutting down trees everywhere, indiscriminately not knowing where the lateral field is going to be located, you're going to compact and destroy where your septic system is going. I have health department flags that I'll scatter out over the area of the lateral field and be like, look, don't mess this up. This is your one chance. But lateral lines can be installed in the wooded areas, but if a lateral line goes through it, obviously you're going to take down the tree.
Sure.
But that has to be done very specifically, not just call someone and demolish the lot. I've had too many of those happen, and it's just frustrating.
No, I appreciate your feedback, appreciate what you do out there. I know it's not an easy job for you with the
No,
entire
it's,
county. to
I love
oversee,
it.
so
I love it. Getting
thank you.
dirty is my jam.
Appreciate it.
All right. You have a question for him?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Question for all of you.
I got it. 5 minutes.
My name is Gene Crady, C-R-A-D-Y, 1306 Robertson Drive, Crestwood. I've been a resident back there for 51 years. I really and truly don't want this development, but all I'm hearing is what we're going to do before the development. We're going to dig holes, we're going to check water, perk tests and all that. What's going to happen after all this is done? You can't go in there and make the lots any larger after the fact. Has any of y'all gone down there to see what running down that hill, running down that creek, through these people's property? No.
Actually, yes, sir, I have. I've walked the entire
Well, I've
property.
got pictures of it. And I'll tell you what, it's
All right,
downright
do you have a
nasty.
question that's technical in nature? If so, you need to phrase your question.
My technical question is, what are we going to do after the fact? Once the septic and the sewage is all gone downhill, then it's too late to do anything.
No, sir, that's what repairs are for.
You're preparing for it. You going to make the lots any bigger?
1 acre is the county minimum.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else for Charlie? All right. Thank you very much, Charlie, for your. All right. We're good. We're good. We're good. All right. So we're going to move on with the rest of the agency comments now. We'll start with mine. And I've got copies of all 3 of these letters that we'll go over here in just a second. So mine are in regards to, the first one is the name and the address of the property owner must be shown on the plans. The PVA currently lists the owner as the Simics and then Mr. Lowe, so that needs to be on there somewhere showing the property owner information. The location and vicinity map shows an adjoining street as Robison. I believe that should be Robertson on that street on the vicinity map. Include the locations of existing or proposed fire hydrants to ensure compliance with Oldham County Fire Hydrant Ordinance, and include this in the legend. I know that's something that you'll continue to work through with fire and the water department, but that needs to be on there as well. Include cluster mailbox location on the plan. If the Postal Service is not requiring a cluster system, because frankly we don't really know what they're requiring today, include a letter in regard to that. Ensure access easement sizes are correct based on Oldham County subdivision regulations, section 7.1. Access easements must be 40 feet minimum right-of-way width. And then I've got 4 notes listed on adjoining property owners that look to be incorrect. And those are lots 112, 111, 109, 110, as well as 108, 107, lot 84, and lot 83. So those are, I started listing the correct people, but then I got, my fingers started hurting from the keyboard. So I just started listing the ones that are incorrect and need to be updated. So I would check those PVA records to be sure the adjoining property owners are correct. And then include on the plans any requests for variances and waivers that are going to be needed. And I've already talked to the applicant about those in regards to road frontage in the agricultural and conservation zoning districts, as well as any potential waiver from any subdivision regulations that need to be requested as well. That concludes my comments. KYTC, Jason Richardson, did send an email that said they have reviewed the proposed entrance location on Fieble Lane and notified the applicant that a commercial entrance could be approved on the condition that the roadside vegetation within the area circled below, and they've got a map, is cleared and maintained as such in order to open up sight lines in that direction. Other than that, the entrance will need to meet or exceed our minimum specs: 24-foot throat width, 35-foot corner radii, asphalt or concrete, per the minimum design on our commercial entrance typical drawing. Only one access would be allowed out to Fieble Lane. And I've included that email as well. With that, I'm going to switch it up and go down to this side of the table because I'm going to hit Water District first. So, Russ.
Sure. So we've not reviewed any construction plans at this point, but we have looked at fire flow requirements and needs. And so there would need to be a connection both at Fieble Lane, at Carpenter Lane, and then an off-site connection at Highway 22 and Carpenter, where it connects a 6-inch to a 16-inch. So that would increase the flow there. As far as the easements go, I think we would need to talk about how water service would be addressed to these lots that don't front along the road. So 30, 38, 35, 34, 31, and 30, we'd have to address how those would be served. Although you have an access easement at this point, it doesn't really address how utilities are going to get back there. And then without construction plans, we don't know yet. We would need to talk about, typically water is outside the right-of-way and in private easement, but we'd want to talk to the developer about that as well. And then lastly, we would like to look at a connection to the south to Robertson Court for both redundancy for both developments there. That would potentially allow some fire protection to the south to the Robertson Court area.
All right. Thank you. Chief?
Piggyback off of the hydrant ordinance for the fire hydrants and locations, obviously pending approval between the two of us. And then one of the questions I wasn't for sure about in regards to the lot 38, 35, 34, 31, 30, are they going to share a driveway or I guess to be determined? Will that share a driveway with multiple mailboxes or will they have individual driveways to those back lots? Does that make sense what I'm asking? How would lot 38 and 37, 39 and 35, would they share one driveway or will they have individual driveways?
So what we did for lot 38, it's individual. It just serves one lot, this driveway. And lot 37 is actually served from the main road, Sundance Boulevard. And then for the road 34, 35, we did something that's called hammerhead. Basically, this is private driveway, but it's shared between these two lots. And then each one has kind of a little extension that feeds the lot itself. So that's the situation for the lot 34 and 35, and then lot 30 and 31.
Okay.
And if there is something that needs to be adjusted, of course, we can do that. Each one of these lots, it's far bigger than 1 acre. So if we need any additional, space for anything, we can do that.
We're just for access through with emergency vehicles.
Right.
And addressing where it's clear and concise at 3 a.m. when we're trying to find your house.
Yeah, that's why we went to hammerhead, because that kind of gives you
Okay.
turning radius.
No, that's nothing further.
All right, thank you. Matt?
We'd already gone over briefly some of the road names, and then once the final, layout of all the lots, we'll just assign it the numbers. So that's the only comment that I have.
Since I'm not following any sort of order, I'm going to go to Michael Williams, since his comments are going to be briefer than yours, so.
Okay, so based on the number of 38, that would net us, based on our current calculations, 6 students out of this development. Serving schools would be Locust Grove, East Oldham Middle School, Oldham County High School. Based on the current numbers, it would put it at 108.65% of capacity. So calculated that out, it would be 24 units per year.
Thank you. Now, Jim.
So as usual, for a subdivision of this size, it's greater than 1 acre disturbance, so you'll be required to get an Oldham County Stormwater Quality Management and Erosion Control Permit from my office, at which time you'll submit construction drawings, which we'll review and ensure they're in accordance with our stormwater management ordinance, our post-construction runoff ordinance, and construction site runoff ordinances. That'll include the calculations and design for stormwater runoff, detention and retention, any discharges to the state right-of-way. Our requirements for the 2, 10, and 100-year storms, state right-of-way, you need to add the 25-year storm to your calculations. You'll also be required to get your Kentucky Division of Water KYR 10 permit for the greater than acre disturbance through the state. There's appears to be a mapped blue line stream just along the west of the property. It's hard to tell from the mapping whether it's on or just off the property. So we're going to need to see some more contours to that side to really know where that lies, and any impact to that stream would require Army Corps and Division of Water permitting for construction in or along a stream, the 401 and 404 permitting. If not, we just need letters from those agencies stating that you're not impacting them. The KYTC, you already mentioned, I think, Jason Richardson's comments about access to Fieble Lane, since that's a state route. Looks like you need to update the FEMA map panel numbers. The area doesn't appear to be in the 100-year flood hazard area, but the map numbers are not up to date on your plan. The detention also will require the water quality standard and within our ordinance, so just review that ordinance and design that. I mentioned when Charlie was talking earlier about the consideration for maybe some larger lots, because when again, we're trying to squeeze a house, a driveway, and potentially a detention basin, because none are shown here. We don't know where they're going to be on a lot. We run out of room for a septic system. Sometimes we do see those, but they're on larger lots. So I'm going to work with Charlie. We'll have to work with you to make sure it's reasonably laid out. There should be no new trees within those basins, and the basins, the outfall of any basin should be 15 feet from a property line. That's to ensure maintenance in the future of that downstream end. Need to, all the draws, in the letter it specifies them more specifically, but these individual topographic draws where water is leaving the site, whether you've got a basin that's discharging, and we'll check the calculations, or if you're increasing runoff from new impervious surface, we need to see calculations ensuring that the existing culverts downstream of that can handle the flow you're creating, so you don't wash out an existing culvert under a driveway or road or anything else. The pavement section's not shown on your street section. Our regulations call for 1 inch of asphalt surface on 4 inch of asphalt base on 9 inches of DGA. We also accept 1.5 inches of surface on 3.5 inches of base as an alternative that provides a little thicker surface, more durable. Ryan and some of the others already talked about the minimum access being 40 feet for these lots, and also needing to address the frontage, whether you're getting a waiver or how that's being handled. Lastly, I think, well, just a note for the public. So at this stage in development, we can't tell from the profile or the horizontal alignment of the road design what it's designed to, and with regard to AASHTO standards of curves. So that's typical for future submittals, and really for construction plan review. If this plan is approved by Planning Commission, that's when we will work with you to ensure that your roads are designed to those standards for typically a 25-mile-an-hour road in this case. We had talked previously, I think, at some meetings, whether or not a traffic study was going to be required. After looking at the existing traffic on Feibel Lane, the nearest traffic count shows 581 vehicles per day, so that's really well under the 1,500 mark for a traffic assessment. So really looking at the traffic you generate, which is a total of 40 trips, even though that's above the 20 trips for a traffic assessment, the second criteria, and it's not an or, it's a and situation, so you don't meet that 1,500 trips on Feibel Lane, so we wouldn't require a traffic impact study or a traffic assessment.
All right, thank you. All right, now we'll open it back up to the audience to once again ask technical questions in nature of anyone now at this point, agencies or the applicant.
Again, Laszlo Simone, 5201 Robertson Court. Drainage was discussed, and I think it's a significant concern that was brought up with the developers at the developer meeting because of the runoff. The property, topographically, if you look at it, all the drainage is directly south and to the west. There are several people have already been impacted by the lay of the land as it is, without even the addition of roads, houses, swimming pools, driveways, reducing some of the tree lines and so forth that will just add to it. The Kings who are here, and I'm sure they'll probably talk about it, just have to replace a culvert along that southern area because of the runoffs at a cost of nearly $12,000 because of the significant runoff washed out the culverts. There's two significant runoffs along the southern areas that are just fed by small drainage culverts that then run directly behind our property, the Kings and others, that given like a day today or on Monday, it runs pretty heavy. Everything else runs to the west, including Donna Murphy, whose home has a 5-foot culvert that was completely plugged up, and the county had to come out and clean it up. I know that they've developers cleared the land, have removed a number of the trees and vegetation, and likely will have to meet the septic systems on the western edge of the properties, which will again further cause issues with runoffs. There's no, at this time, there's no drawings or plans for any retention or detention facilities. What is the plan going forward on that to minimize the runoff and the impact for us? And does that, again, take away from, as you were noting, the size of the lot because of everything else that needs to go? How big are those, and how does that impact what can be done?
Again, like Charlie said, he mentioned the minimum acreage in our regulations is 1 acre, but since this is a new development, I think we really need to look at making sure everything fits. So I can't tell you right now. We're going to have to work with the developer to see if there's some alternatives. And the reason I can't tell you right now is because those proposed basin locations aren't shown. I would expect there's going to be a few or more basins. There can't be too many, but there can't be too few. And those basins are designed to take into account the changes. When we review the plans that are given to us, their calculations should show the existing wooded area, the existing grassy, and each of those settings have values. Mm-hmm. And then we look at the value of the changed condition where you've got driveways and rooftops and roads and manicured lawns. And those values are calculated. They go into the formula for how large this basin needs to be and the outlet size. And again, the outlets are sized to discharge what are called the 2, 10, and 100-year storm. And I mentioned if it's outletting to the state right-of-way, a 25-year storm also, to try and ensure that the post-construction runoff is the same or less than the pre-construction. That's kind of the best we can do are those calculations, but that's what we're going to look at. And
So is that your office that will do
Yes.
that study and then?
no. They do the calculations
Okay.
and provide them to my office, and we review that and ensure that we typically go through and make corrections and say, no, you need to change this, and make sure it meets those standards.
And at what point does that happen? Before planning commission or?
No, that actually happens with construction plan review, which is after, if it gets approved by planning commission.
Okay.
The thought being that's a fairly intensive amount of work for their engineer to do all those calculations
Sure.
and do that full design. So for them to expend that money when they don't even have an approved subdivision is not fair. So typically, they need to bring enough detail to the planning commission to show that this is an acceptable development, and that's what the planning commission will determine. And then at that point, if it's approved, they're free to go through with the final construction drawings.
Yes, it's as I noted, it's a huge concern for us. We've already
Yeah.
felt the impact. And again, with the clearing of the land and the addition of all those properties, it's just going to magnify it, gutters and so forth. A question in regarding to the, since I'm up here, regarding the water flow and the hydrant issues, tying in a 6-inch and a 4-inch to, and then also at 22. Is there are the hydrants able to handle the pressures that's required to meet the hydrant regulations?
Yes, we've done the hydraulic analysis, and we can meet the fire flow requirement there with those connections.
Okay. And those would be every 400 feet. Is that what the layout for the hydrants?
Yeah, so we keep 1,000 feet of LDH on our fire apparatus. I think the ordinance is every 800 feet.
Okay.
So, but we'll get with the engineers and strategically place them where we can lay in and meet that, where we can make, get the fire engine to the appropriate locations based off the hydrants as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know if the applicant or your engineer want to show potential basin locations on here. I know we've talked about that. If you just want to show where they're going to be to ease some fear or not, whichever.
My name is Mohammed Nouri. The address is 1119 Rostrover. That's in Louisville, 40205. Before I start, greetings and good afternoon to all of you. In terms of the drainage, we looked at this entire lot and used the existing topography and to identify where those natural drainage areas are, and in order to direct the drainage towards those specific areas. Within that regard, the entire site has been divided into 7 sections. Rather than managing your storm system in one location or 2 larger locations, we have basically divided it into 7 specific outlets, and that's where those water, the drainage will be directed towards those 7 specific locations. Now, we will also are committing that there won't be any additional discharge to your adjacent property owners because of this post-development. Yes, there will be some additional rooftops. Yes, there will be additional roadways and so forth. Those will be managed through these drainage areas into these smaller detention basins. That's how the stormwater will be managed and not spill onto the adjoining property owners. Now, not knowing exactly, as Jim mentioned, that there's a large amount of work will need to go into that. We need to figure out what the 25-year or 50-year or whatever, after consultation with your county engineer, will determine what those design criterias are, and then we will design those detention basins based on those design criterias, and also that we heard that there will be some water quality measures will be incorporated into those detention basin areas. So when the outflow at that detention basin, the water that comes out, it is in a better quality and a better conditions than what they are today. So that has been sort of the conceptual drainage, the thought went into the development or how to handle the drainage, the surface drainage within this project.
So based off those 7 areas that you noted, can you use the cursor on there to show on that plat where those are potentially going to be located?
Yes. First, I need to put my eyes on. Starting from the Fiber Lane area, that is one area, but you can see we are picking up the drainage from this roadway up to from Fiber Lane all the way to this. I'm sorry. Thank you, Alma. So we basically about 150 to 200 feet of roadway that we are picking up through a pipe or a curb and gutter and a catch basin, and there will be a small pipe. We are anticipating those will be no more than 12 to 15 inches because in reality, again, when you divide this entire site into a smaller section, that amount of the surface drainage that you are picking up, it's so small. So we think that 12 to 15 inch pipe will be more than adequate. For more than anything else, it's more of the maintenance issue that we would like to at least maintain that size, which has an ample capacity to handle that surface. So that is one. The second one will be right here. That's another pipe that goes underneath and has an outlet, and you see there is a drainage flow areas. Then the third one is here. The fourth one will be right here. And then at the end of the cul-de-sac, that we will pick up the drainage that falls into this roadway on at the cul-de-sac. There's another outlet that comes this way, and there's another drainage pipe will be under at the secondary cul-de-sac. So those are the 7 outlet points that will be located within this entire development. Again, the point was to smaller these areas are, the less of a drainage discharge that we are actually sending to these drainage facilities. And at the end of those drainage pipes, that will be based on these analysis that we will do. Those will be that we can locate these mini detention basins that will hold the water and release it at the level that is out there today that's being released. So basically the post-development discharge will be less or equal to the pre-development discharge. So that is our aim of in calculating the size and the depth of those detention basins.
I wanted to add something real quick while we're talking about stormwater, and I forgot to mention from my letter earlier, is that it also looks like on Mave Avenue and Morrill Lane, you do have some curb inlets at the downstream end of those cul-de-sac bulbs. Typically, we'd recommend you bring those inlets up to the radius where it comes into the bulbs because it captures water as opposed to it jetting down the cul-de-sac bulb and jumping over the curb and going into someone's yard. So that's one thing. Also, just looking at like Mave Avenue specifically, I think that's maybe 8 or 1,200 feet long. Probably more length than that road is able to handle for a gutter spread. So you're likely going to have pipe and storm sewer going up that road to get the water off the roadway, and it's not shown there. And also, just so you're clear, and so everyone in the audience is clear also, that even though the final design of the basins is not expected until construction plan review, which is after Planning Commission, for Planning Commission, there should be preliminary design work done showing, so you can at least preliminarily size and place those basins, and those will need to be on the plan for Planning Commission.
Okay. Do they, I guess the question is, absent the final design, we will just locate those detention basin, possible detention basin without the further, I mean, we don't know, again, how big that they might be or how deep they need to be.
Well, so typically, I mean, you can do the preliminary calculation just for sizing it.
Okay, gotcha.
And again, not nailed down accurate, but preliminary, and get a general size looking at the topography. That's typically what we're going to see at the Planning Commission level.
Taken.
So I just would like to add something for this answer. We have more than 50 acres here, the properties, and the road takes something more than 4 acres. So we are left with something short of 46 acres for lots. That means that we could have had if we did it that way, 46 lots. We actually have 38. That tells us that we have plenty of bigger lots than 1 acre, and that's kind of those detention basins where they are supposed to be are actually going to be in the areas where we have lots 1.2, 1.1 acre. So I'm positive, and we looked at that we have plenty of room for detention basins and the septic lateral field and repair field and everything that is required, because our lots are not. Only on the north side, they are 1 acre. Most of others are bigger, so.
All right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hi. Donna Rabbit Murphy, 1307 Robertson Drive, Crestwood. My property is directly adjoining this property, and I'm lower where my lateral lines are than where they are. So in the spring, when the rains came, all their runoff came, it flooded my lower level. And I had to call the road department to unblock the culvert going over Robertson Drive. My question, technical, is what's going to protect me?
Well, again, that's the implementation of detention basins to release the water so that the post-construction runoff doesn't exceed the pre-construction. It's the design and implementation of those detention basins.
So were they aware that they had flooded my property?
Previous to this development, I mean,
That was
I don't
just this
know.
spring when they owned it.
Right.
And they had already cleared it. I mean, that's what I'm saying, is I don't think they realize what's happening to the property that's below them. So I want it on record that this problem is already existent. That's where my lateral lines are for my septic system, and it's flooded. You can review the road department's records. They actually had to come out.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Ryan King, sorry about my outburst earlier. Just we've already have a flooding problem because of the runoff there, and I know the detention, cisterns or whatever you want to call them are supposed to design to help, but literally that whole line and is me, and it seems like that's the uphill, we're the downhill, and right now our property at the base, it culminates in a bowl at the bottom. It goes through 5700 to 5710. It's already washed out one culvert, like I think Laz said, was It's about $12,000 only because I knew the guy who did it. If I had not known the guy who did it, it would have been much more. And then right now, we're about to lose the culvert under 5710 because that creek that goes through from that property, it feeds in all this drainage is washing out our roads. And at one point, there was no way. I had to take out fence posts to get to my son and daughter-in-law live on 5700. And to get to their house, I had to take out sections of fence until I could get someone to to recreate the drive there. It washed out the whole driveway. It was about a 20-foot section. I just need to make sure when you, and Mrs. Murphy right there rightly said, when you clear land, you create more. And right now we're channeling, what I'm worried is that right now it's, drainage right now, they aren't building anything, but they're clearing things. And that creates, and what they're talking about, that creates less resistance and less things to absorb water. And when they're focusing, what I really worry about is when they're focusing the drainage, it's going to create bigger problems for me and also several other people in this room, erosion from the creek, which is, pretty small on both sides. And I'm just worried what kind of arrangements are being made. I'm really worried that they really haven't put as much thought as you would think into minimizing this damage because it's going to affect me very directly, and I'm sure others as well. I know there's a lot to do. I'm just worried about it because it's already affected me. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Jim, do you have anything you want to respond to with that? Okay. Yes, sir.
That's Chris Billings again, 5616 Fible Lane. And I hate to beat a dead horse, but did want to show some photos of where the drainage is going currently. You want to put it under there? All right. Is that good enough? So our driveway abuts the planned development, and currently this is the low spot that I was mentioning to Charlie when he was here. All the water from the top of the hills comes down to this particular spot and tries to get through to our culvert. That culvert then feeds a creek, which runs behind our house, behind the King's homes, by Lazo's house, etc. So this was this morning, and this is how much drainage we currently get, and that's not even a heavy rain. We've seen it worse before where those rocks were almost underwater last summer. We had big rains. It's just another picture. That's the area to the culvert. And again, this area here used to be all wetlands. It used to have vegetation on it. All that was cleared out. This is the creek that I mentioned before. This is a close-up view. Right now, they have vegetation lining the fence line next to our driveway, so none of the water can get through. So this is starting to flood over. That's another picture of the creek right now. So that's a gully that's going through 30. So again, this is an area, there's a ton of drainage right now with no homes on there whatsoever. So this is a problem going forward. And with our driveway, if it rains and we get washed out, there's no way for the fire department to get to us. And there's nothing. We have one way in, one way out. So there's no option for us if our driveway gets washed away. This is a picture coming from one of the ponds, the pond on the front near Fible Lane. And you can see the drainage coming off of that and actually running over the driveway. This also feeds into the King's driveway as well. And this is just more water accumulating along the driveway. And again, the design that he just mentioned is he's putting all the water on the driveway. Well, if you start taking water from a road and pushing into a driveway, you create even bigger problems than this. And that's really the point. And you can see where the water is running out of that pond right there in that picture. So I just wanted to, the technical question is really, and I know you said that we can't know until it's gone through planning commission and everything else, but how do we protect our driveway if the developer is not going to do it? And so that, you know, like I said, we've got one way in, one way out. If there's an emergency and our driveway gets washed away, that's a problem.
So again, the ordinance requires that the developer and their designer provide detention or stormwater management so that the post-construction runoff doesn't exceed the pre. So it's not their responsibility to
Well, this
make it
is
any
after
better.
they cleared the land, though. It wasn't like this before they cleared the land.
No.
So you're looking at after they've already cleared land, what the impact is currently. And so they've already gone through and changed things by clearing land, filling in that one creek. So, you know, the question is, how do we get back to where it was before?
Well,
You can't, right?
There are limits to what I think we can regulate, and our ordinance is for land disturbance, and frequently we see clearing going on, and if they're not really disturbing the land, it's not anything that we can enforce from that land disturbance side. So maintenance of their property and changes to it, some are allowed.
I understand that. I mean,
we're here to regulate what they're proposing for the major development.
Do we, as people that are going to be directly impacted by this, do we get to see what their plans are for retention, detention basins, and what that would be before it goes to planning commission?
So again, they will have to have those preliminary locations on the planning commission drawing. So
Okay.
Again, they're not going to have detailed plans for planning commission. That'll come later if approved.
Okay. The other question was, I think someone had brought up before about there had to be certain road frontage.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got a series of lots back there that are using private drives. Is that something that you would address?
That's more of a zoning question, so I'll let Ryan.
So that's something they'll have to ask for those variances from. So those lots that take access off of easements. So the rules allow you to take 3 parcels off of an access easement. So technically, you could have 3 parcels come up there. I think they've got 2 coming off each of those access easements. So they would have to ask for variances from those because they don't meet the road frontage requirements in the agricultural zoning area. We see that a lot on state roads. If somebody has a piece of farmland, they want to split off a tract for a child. We see those types of variance requests all the time. So they would have to go get a variance request for those, and those would have to be granted as well, or those lots would have to change to have road frontage on any of those roads. So,
And this is probably more of a planning commission question, but correct me if I'm wrong. When construction goes on, how do we stop people from accessing our driveway? Is that a planning commission? And how do I stop people? Because we walk our dogs, our kids go down the driveway. How do we protect our family from what's going on in that subdivision?
So do you mean as far as like construction vehicles or anything accessing?
Or, you know, if someone wants to buy a property on that, wants to buy one of those lots, which just shut off. Jiggle the mouse, right? Okay. A lot of people like to look behind when they go to look at a new piece of land to build a house. And so we anticipate that people that are building in that area would then decide to use our driveway, and we share it with the Huffmans, but they would use our driveway to go back there in the back of the property to take a look at that. Is there a way to stop that, or is that a planning commission question?
so it's kind of a twofold answer here I'll give you. So they do have on their plans, and I don't know if it's on this set because I really can't read the words very good on here, but so they do have a construction entrance noted on here because that's something we would check on the plans that would provide
that
any
on
comments.
Fievel?
That comes off Fievel.
Okay.
So they do have a construction entrance. Now, if construction vehicles start accessing your property, that's something you could call our office and we would get code enforcement and engineering involved in making sure that they don't do that. That could become a code enforcement issue. The other side of that is, I mean, from your private property, you could put up a sign, private drive only, no trespassing.
How many people read?
You could put up a gate of some sort. I mean, any of those on your personal property, you can do that to prevent people from accessing. But as far as anything on your private property, we don't really have a whole lot of recourse that we can do to say, you know.
Okay, so we could put a gate up at Fievel.
Yeah, I mean, they can put a gate on
Do we
there.
need any approval for that?
You just need to be off the state right away.
Okay.
And then if it's going to be a lot,
and I
the
have to give
fire,
you the
fire
code.
we know might have an issue, but
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The other thing is to make sure, you might want to make sure, if you want to put a gate in, make sure it's far enough back that you can pull a vehicle with a trailer and stop and not block Fievel. But I think what Ryan said about the no trespassing sign might be enough.
We've tried that before.
But for,
it didn't work.
But for the bulk of construction vehicles, I would hope that they recognize that the construction entrance is going to look a lot different than yours. It should be obvious. Of course, we're talking about the future.
Yeah.
And then people who just want to use your driveway, I mean, they just need to stay off your property.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people follow whatever that person on the phone tells them to go to. So depending on what the phone directs them to this location, I guess that'll to be seen on whether or not they access that or not. But yeah, I mean, do what is in your means as far as your private property to obviously, limit people that access that for.
All right. Yeah, main concern is really our driveway getting washed out is number one, because without any kind of plan right now, I see it as a huge problem going forward. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, in the back. I'll get you next, okay? No, you're fine.
My name is Dina Ritter. I live at 5011 Carpenter Drive. I'm lot 107.
Mine just need to come up to the mic just a little bit more.
Okay, so I'm in lot 107, 5011 Carpenter Drive. My question is I have a survey from when the subdivision was originally created, which is different than what's in the PVA. And is there a way that we can get these reconciled? Because this entrance to the subdivision is through what I consider my property. So, like I said, we have two different surveys that are different.
Can you bring those surveys to us? Because the one, I think I've spoke to you at my office about this a month or two ago, and
Right. what
I was referencing.
What was in the PVA shows that they have some easement frontage, which is a telephone pole with trees. We need to find out where the property lines are. Because the survey that I have, or was it Gene? I think he left. Gene has also the original survey. I have the original architecture diagrams from the developer of the subdivision. Was gifted to me from the previous owners. So there's a difference between the surveys and what is available in the PVA versus my deed versus
I'd like
the
to just see what
ITS.
those differences are, because again, what I was referencing, and this was just I want to specify this or clarify, this was a cursory search.
Right,
I'm not
I
a surveyor,
agree.
but what we looked at was the record plat of
Right.
the original, the Fievel Farm subdivision,
Mhm.
where it appeared to have that gap where access would be available. But if a licensed surveyor needs to weigh in on this, then we would need to get that.
Okay.
If you have
do I need to set up a meeting with you on this? Like I said, there's difference. I want to get these I want to know how much of my yard I'm going to lose.
Well, I'm not going to be able to determine, I'm not a surveyor, I'm not going to go looking for pins
Okay.
for property corners, but if you could show us what you're talking about as far as the difference, and we can maybe help you find out how to rectify that through the
Okay.
proper channels. But
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, John Davidson again. Just a couple of questions and technical comments. One, I think you guys have to field a lot of these questions over and over because of the simple fact that the answers that we keep receiving to these technical questions is you've got to get approval first, and then we'll see what we do with it. That makes everybody who's affected by this very nervous. We're going to approve, we have to see about getting it approved first, and once it's approved, we'll see how we'll make it work. You're putting the cart ahead of the horse a little bit here. And a lot of us are going to be significantly impacted by this. And as a result, we have a lot of technical questions that we can't get answers to because it's wait till it's approved. So to move on from that, I would like to point out, you've got this map up already. Those of us that are affected by this, about all we have to go on are these drawings. These drawings are next to worthless. They are so cluttered, and I'm an expert at reading maps. And you can't make heads nor tails out of this. I can't tell on here where the right-of-ways for the access to these roads that don't have road frontage. Where is it on here? I can't find it. It's so cluttered. And we don't even know what questions to ask because we can't even really make a lot of details out of this. I mean, is there at any point going to be some breakout drawings where we can just simply see things such as roads, the access to the properties that don't have access, don't have road frontage? Are we going to be able to see that? Because we have questions, but we can't even formulate questions based on what we're looking at here. Is there, at the planning and zoning, are we going to be using this? Is this what we're going to have to determine what's going on? And because it doesn't necessarily jive with the plats, I don't know if this will show up. But
Yep. He'll switch it over. Give it just a second. Oh, it's not working.
Well, the bottom line is this, which we've looked at in the office with you guys before, that doesn't really seem to match the boundaries we're seeing on here. So I forget what, I'm not sure when the surveys were done, but when was this property surveyed? Because what do we believe? Do we believe, which of these are correct? Because this shows Carpenter Lane having a squared off corner on it at the point of access. That's actually a curve, and simple geometry is you're going to have a tangential contact there. Carpenter is curved there. It's not in real life. So how do we know where the exact property boundaries are here? When was the most recent survey done on this property? I'd like to get that from them. And is there going to be a requirement to get this straightened out on the surveys? And what I'm wanting to sort of point out where the confusion comes in when some of us have been discussing aspects of this, right here, we see a pretty significant offset in the properties and how the properties meet. It's not reflected on the survey of the plat of this proposed development. So how accurate is do we know the survey is at the upper left corner where it joins Carpenter Drive?
So I want to clarify real quick. What you're referencing here is from the GIS, and we tell everyone who utilizes that's not survey grade. It's for planning purposes only. So
right.
That's not survey. That's the answer to your question.
Okay, so that means that this is what we've got to look at to try to figure out what's coming into our neighborhood. And this is, like I say, it's unreadable. Not everything is depicted correctly on here. And when there's questions pertaining to road access, I mean, this needs to be accurately depicted. That's not the way Carpenter Drive is. And so anyway, that's just a couple comments I've got in terms of some frustrations at trying to understand what's going on with this development, because it's not clear to us. We can't make out anything in this. But so anyway, the survey is one of our biggest concerns. Is we need to understand exactly where the boundaries of this property is, because that could impact access to the property onto Carpenter, for example. So anyway, I'll move on from that to another item if no one has any response to that. I mean, is there going to be a survey done? Or when was the last survey done?
Can I help you with all that? First of all, I have survey here, and with your help, we can put it up.
Just need to make sure, speak into the microphone for us.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the survey has been done before we purchased the property. We did not buy the property without the survey. I cannot answer all your questions. I don't know what is confusing, but we have a survey, so you can look. No, you need to close this file, and then go and find survey under the list. Right. So survey, yeah. So that's the survey, and that's the company that did survey, and you can obtain copy as well if you don't trust this drawing, or it's a public record, you can have it. And just to help you out with the roads, they show, you see the Carpenter Drive 60 feet right away? That's 60 feet of dedicated land to the road. What you see as a pavement is not 60 feet, and that is curved, and that's probably confusing, so just to help you out with that.
No, I fully understand the 60-foot right-of-way. My point is, if that curves and is not squared, then it's not touching the boundary everywhere. But again, because it's not depicted, the road is not depicted as it actually exists. So the right-of-way would be curving away from the boundary, not running parallel to it there. I'm splitting hairs, but I mean, when it comes to a survey, I think on this level, you've got to have 1-inch accuracy on a survey of this type, and this could be several feet.
Well, but I don't know if you're confusing the road, the pavement, and the right-of-way.
No, I understand the right-of-way.
So the right-of-way could deviate from. I'm not, and I mean, this is it's stamped by a licensed surveyor. I'd still like to compare it to some other sources.
No, you're not following. I'm not being clear, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe I can explain this to you, what my concerns at another time. But we're just concerned about the surveys, and I'm not the only one, because it's already been that topic's already been broached before I came up. So anyway, we can move on from this. My next question has to do with. I guess would be to you, would have to do with lighting. The Oldham County subdivision ordinances, do they address lighting? Is that?
Yeah.
That's for you?
We do not require neighborhoods to have lighting.
Okay. And as a result, are there any restrictions on the lighting if lighting is provided?
Do you remember when you looked up the lighting yesterday in regards to that neighborhood, what it said?
Yeah, our lighting specifications aren't specific towards neighborhoods or subdivisions versus commercial, but John and I, our planner over here, he looked at them and he actually has them. Do you want to speak to that? Or you can
go up there.
You can go there.
There are a number of ordinances in terms of how bright lights can be, whether they can cross property lines, and whether or not, the lumen level at those property lines, and then the directionality of the light as well.
Do you all intend, sorry, John, do you all intend to put lighting in the neighborhood? Okay.
When will we be able to see these plans for the lighting?
So typically, any lighting regulations don't come until construction plan approval, and those
See,
are
and here
approved
we
at
go
staff
again.
level. But that's our job to determine whether or not those lumens cross property lines. That's where our job comes in for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the planning commission doesn't even, just because we don't regulate, we don't force neighborhoods to do lighting. If they do, though, when they bring those in, we ensure that that light doesn't encroach. If it does, feel free to give us a call. We'll send code enforcement to go ahead and start a case if that's what it requires, and we'll call the developer and say, we need you to do something with the lighting. Because unfortunately, we don't work at night, so you all are going to have to be the eyes and ears on that to say, hey, look, the lighting from this neighborhood, but just because you're not able to see Venus anymore at night because of their light isn't going to be something that we're going to go out and be like, you need to tone the lights down because we can't see Neptune. So just understand that that's, it's a slippery slope on what we can go and require and enforce, because if the lumens don't encroach across the property line, just because the sky is not as dark as it was, isn't going to be a whole lot that we're going to be able to go out and do. So.
Okay. One other thing, you mentioned the state, Fiber Lane's a state highway, Carpenters County, correct?
Correct.
So the state mentioned no traffic studies required. Does the county, when looking at these traffic situations and so forth, or other issues, does the county, even though the county doesn't control Fiber Lane, does the county look at impacts to Fiber Lane as a result of the development that the county approves or disapproves? Because even though you don't have control over Fiber, you're going to impact it. Does the county themselves put any consideration into impacts onto an adjacent state highway to a development?
Yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. And if you were here for the previous docket, we spoke about impacts to Kentucky Highway 22 from that development. And what we do is we work with the state. However, there are limitations, and in this case, there's not being a traffic assessment or traffic impact study being required by the county or the state because it doesn't meet the levels. The state typically requires that there's 100 peak hour trips generated before a traffic impact assessment is needed, and this is nowhere near that. There's typically about one peak hour trip per lot, per residential lot. So we're talking about around 40. In this case, you even have potentially 2 entrances, so those trips get distributed. So now you're thinking maybe somewhere between 20 and 30 trips on Fiber Lane, so it's well below the state's requirement. The county requirements are a little different. We also have the traffic assessment, which is really an abbreviated traffic impact study that can be required if you're above 20 peak hour trips generated by the development, but there's also the requirement that it has to enter onto a roadway that has an existing volume of 1,500 trips. And I mentioned earlier, if you look at the traffic counts on Fievel, it's only 581. That was I think a 2019 trip count, so fairly recently. So we're really not we're not able to require they provide that. But at the same time, we do look at it, and if we had concerns maybe from sight distance, and my review letter to the developer mentions the connector to Carpenter Drive, where even though we're not requiring a traffic assessment or a traffic impact study, we do want to ensure that the geometry of that connection is safe, because right now it looks like there's a bit of a skew and there's a tight radius. So we'll coordinate with them and make sure that's a safe connection, just like we would with any other entrance on the road. If you wanted to build a driveway onto a county road, you have to get an encroachment permit. And we're going to come out, one of our inspectors is going to check and ensure that sight distance is provided and is appropriate for that speed road. The state does the exact same thing. Even though they are not requiring a traffic impact study, they're going to ensure that there is safe ingress and egress at that point.
Okay, that's all I got. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, Amy Billings, 5616 Fievel Lane. I'd like to piggyback on the traffic study. As a parent of a public school child, I am up at the top of the driveway, which runs along the property every day, every school day. I am up there morning and afternoon, and I would like to invite you to see what the traffic is like and the congestion that we actually have during our school bus pickup and drop off hours, especially being right around that curve. The sight lines, you've mentioned the sight lines, but especially with oncoming construction traffic and potentially more traffic on that road. That's a very small, short road. So the impact of 589 cars on a maybe 3 to 4 mile thoroughfare versus 1,500, on a larger road is that even taken into account? Because 589 cars in 2019 on such a short road, which is very windy, a lot of sight lines you really don't have a lot of sight lines with as curvy as it is and hilly, and you have no shoulders on that very narrow road. And so as a parent with my child getting picked up in that bus and dropped off, I see those cars coming around that curve and stacking up behind the bus. And there are many instances, probably weekly, where there's people who don't pay attention going around that curve, and I just about witness accidents, backing up into the cars that are backed up behind the bus. So that is a huge concern of mine, and I really am not comforted by this 1,500 threshold that you have on such a short, narrow road. And so I would like to know, at what point do you consider that to be a safety concern? Does an accident have to happen before you consider it a safety concern? Because I would like to invite you to come out and see this between 3 and 4 in the afternoon and 8 and 9 in the morning.
So I'm familiar with the road, very
Good.
familiar with
Good.
it. I don't travel it at those times. I'm usually here at the office.
I would like to invite you to.
But looking at the curve, all I can say is right now we would need to check the sight distance requirements. It looks like it's around 300 feet. I don't recall what the minimum sight distance requirement for that the speed of that roadway, but we'll look at that. And since you brought it up now, we certainly won't come to Planning Commission without that answer.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Understand, though, that drivers don't typically drive the speed limit, right? So
Correct.
that's a whole other issue. What we're going to look at is the posted speed
But
limit.
when you add more traffic to an already small road, including construction traffic in addition, that becomes more of a concern than it already is, which it is a concern. And it's not just a concern for the bus, it's a concern for us, even making that left-hand turn out there, or
And
even a
that's-
right-hand turn.
We'll certainly make sure that the sight distance is compared to the requirements.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Arna Davidson, just had a couple technical questions. On the plat that was up previously with the lots, my question is, what's the acceptable margin of error on measuring these lots? Because, many of them are cut pretty tight, out to the thousandths, 1.005. Is there, any, what is the acceptable margin of error for these 1 acre lots?
The designer can probably answer this better than me, but that's probably generated by the computer model. He's got they have this in a computer model, and the area is just generated from that. So as it's drawn, that's probably very accurate.
So we can be assured that they truly are 1.0004 or 5, whatever, in size, that they meet the requirements.
The lots as drawn are shown as greater than an acre, so they appear to meet that requirement.
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Okay. And then my other question, and I know this was discussed earlier, but, and I was going to try to show a video here if I can. This is karst topography in this entire area. We have, we're right across the street from the subdivision, and we just have very active underground sinkholes, and streams. And my concern are, just now we heard about these retention areas, these 7 sites that would be put in. Will the first one the gentleman mentioned on Fibel, would that keep any groundwater from further contaminating our property? Can I put this under for a video?
Yeah, I think just wait till he, there you go.
So this is this morning on our property, one of these underground streams, and we've got a sinkhole as well. Let me just show you that. And that's a sinkhole on our property, and that was today. You can see the water, and we try to take great care. We're not just throwing junk in these holes because we know or assume they're headed out to Floyd's Fork or wherever. So, will these, is it reasonable to think that these retention basins that you're proposing, these 7 sites, will that keep these areas from getting worse?
well, my thought is, and if it really depends on how they design those basins, and I'll ask that they provide that information for Planning Commission. And what I mean is whether they're retention or detention ponds, because a detention pond means that it's dry during the dry season and it only holds water for a 24 to 48 hour period while it's slowly discharging it to keep those post-construction runoff levels where they're supposed to be. So if you're so what we're talking about is an existing water course that's had a dry basin put in it. I don't know how it affects would it negatively affect the existing groundwater? I don't think so, because there's already water running through there. You're just trying to retain it for a short period of time to not affect the adjoining neighborhood.
I mean, in the developer's experience and other developments, do you have any knowledge of that? I mean, to keep the groundwater from being contaminated, will these basins prevent that, from your knowledge from other developments? What's the purpose then? I honestly don't know. I don't know the purpose of the.
I mean, you're talking about underground groundwater it's very dynamic. I can't tell you other than the fact that, again, if it's a dry basin then it's not like they're concentrating new water there. They're not creating a new pond that would affect groundwater.
But I mean, have you seen this problem from your other developments with the, encroaching on other properties, surrounding properties?
If you're going to answer, you'll have to go to the mic.
Oh.
Okay.
No? Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, and then let me get you, Albert, right? Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just kind of dovetails to what she was just.
Okay.
I mean, I can wait.
Okay, go ahead, Albert, please.
Albert Harrison, 114 McMakin Manor, LaGrange, 40031. I need to explain a little bit of my background so you understand my comments. When I was 10 years old, I was helping my father survey, and he surveyed and laid out Fiable Farms, along with 40 or 50 other subdivisions. I've done that on my own since 1974. I surrendered my license and put it in the retired category with the State Board of Licensure in 2020 after 50 years of being licensed. I'm still licensed, but I cannot practice surveying, which means I have to be careful what I say. Unfortunately for some in the room, unfortunately for others. If you would put the plat back up, that survey has absolutely no value and no meaning to this hearing or this application. None. Because it's not referenced in any material I've read. You've got what appears to be survey calls around the subject tract of property, but where did those calls come from? You've got symbols on there that typically would indicate monuments or lot corners, but they're not shown in the legend. The only professional whose name appears anywhere is Mr. Nuri. And I think a lot of the information on it, because there's a ton of engineering data on that plat. But the law requires that it be signed and sealed by a professional engineer. And it's not. The law also requires that any delineation or definition of the boundary be signed and sealed by a professional land surveyor. And it is not. So my question is, why are we here? Because that is a type of plat that I was examining in the late 1980s when I was a member of the State Board of Licensure. And that kind of plat was what was being submitted. And it was that kind of plat that caused people either to lose their license or be put on suspension because it is so incomplete. Does anybody know where the zoning district line is on the map? Could they show that?
So just to the left of where it says BFD3.
That's a soil classification, right? BFD?
That I don't know. I'm not a soil dude. But
Pardon
the
me?
zoning line is, you can read it.
Soil.
It says zoned CO1, zoned AG1. It's a dotted line.
I'm sorry, I still didn't catch how she was. I can't do stereo. I'm sorry, Rob.
So going from lot 107,
All right. 107.
adjoining the property. So if you find lot 107 there,
Oh, and Fiable Farms.
yes.
All right, got it.
So and then that zoning line runs all the way down that left side, and you see it says zoned CO1 to the left, and AG1 to the right.
All right, well, still not seeing it, but it's very subtle. It really doesn't matter because the yard requirements, I believe, are the same for AG1 as they are for CO1.
Correct.
But my question is, do lots 14, 15, 16, 22, 23, and 24 meet the requirements per lot frontage in either one of those zoning categories? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is no, because it would be 150 feet. People get the AG and CO confused with the residential, but they're that way for a reason, because it was the intent of the state legislature to not allow developments like this that would eat up the frontage. So whereas you had a lot width designation requirement in the residential, you have a lot frontage requirement in AG and CO. And we got too many lots.
Which they could ask for a variance for from, though, correct?
Pardon me?
The state law does allow them the opportunity to ask for a variance from those lots if they don't meet the road frontage requirement, though, correct?
I believe so.
Okay, so that statement has already been made by our letter that if they're going to ask for variances from any lot, they need to note that, and they're going to have to apply for the variances.
Well, all right.
So, I mean, I understand your point. I understand that there's lots that don't meet the road frontage requirement based off AG1 or CO1, but they do have the opportunity, based on state law, to ask for a variance from those requirements.
And the two sets of flag lots possibly also.
Right. Now, whether or not that gets approved at the appropriate board is to be determined, but
Is there a point at which a professional land surveyor will be involved in this before it goes to the planning commission?
do you want to answer that? I mean,
Be careful, it's in your regs. And it's in KRS 322.
We're going to take it up with the county attorney and determine what's required.
Okay. I wasn't planning on this today.
Sure.
I saw where it was going. The other concern, and I'm like you, I have trouble reading these things. At what point will there be a requirement for street grades to be shown? Because I can't tell if they're on this now.
You mean the profile grade of the roadway?
Pardon me?
The profile grade of the roadway or the cross section? I'm just curious what specifically you're
Existing and
asking.
proposed, so you can see the cut and fill.
Oh, we rarely have that at planning commission.
I'll check
That
the
comes
regs.
through. That comes through with construction
Okay.
plan drawings.
I understand.
Yeah.
PVA. Do not use PVA plats. Period. Because I can show you examples where PVA's got a property line going through a house. That doesn't make it correct. That's just somebody's idea of where the property lines could be, should be, might be. But anything that Matt turns out of his office, it's got a lot more scientific basis to it than PVA. And we've tried to clean that office up for years and just no luck. So saying that this doesn't agree with PVA, that's a red herring, because what's submitted is what counts.
so then in regards to that answer, going off what the record plat shows would be the most accurate, correct? Going off what has been recorded in the deed room by a licensed surveyor that was done at record
Yes,
would be the most accurate.
that's a Bible.
Okay.
I don't think the entrance to Five Farms is wrong. I haven't seen the survey she mentioned.
Okay. All right.
But the roads are done first.
Okay.
Based on highway permits. So, thank you for your indulgence.
Thank
Hope it
you.
helps.
Thank you.
To a couple questions back. Talking about the karst geology that exists, most of the homes, you have to understand, most of the homes along Fiber Lane have had to have foundation repairs. You get a new driveway poured, it's cracked almost immediately. There's so much activity that goes on subsurface, it's cost a lot of us a lot of money over the years. And the sinkholes that Arna was speaking of, they're very active. We had our lawnmower collapsed into a sinkhole a while back. No one was hurt, but that was the sinkhole she had the video of. And that's groundwater not running into the sinkhole, it opens up and you see the underground spring flowing. Now, when she asked the question, all the answers seemed to be about the surface water. I understand the surface water sheds away from our property, but we don't know what's going on underground. That spring I'm looking at could very easily be coming from right where one of the lateral lines is going to go. With the geology that underlies this, pretty much this entire county, but Fiber Lane is exceptionally active. What kind of assurances can we get that we're not getting from underneath the ground? I'm not talking the surface runoff. I'm not talking retention ponds. I'm talking about what's going on underneath the surface. It's a very dynamically active area. And we've got serious concerns because our property lies lower than much of that property. And we're just a few feet away from where some houses will potentially be. So does the Planning Commission, does anybody in the TRC ever consider the groundwater, the karst geology and how it adversely affects with a potential development like this?
So it's difficult to identify every sinkhole on a site. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And so typically what we require is if they're identified, that they're shown on the record plat for future reference. I mean, I agree with you 100%. It's very dynamic. It's very unknown. It's underground. The entire county and the surrounding counties are karst, and we've got springs all over the place. So it's a challenge. But we work with it the way we can. I think I can't answer, I'm not trying to avoid this question, but the septic question is for Charlie, and Charlie's the expert, so I'm not going to answer that one and how it affects that quality. But again, the record platting process, they try to identify it. We've had several subdivisions that we've looked at recently that we have to work around large or small sinkholes, whether for just drainage purposes or for the actual home construction. And sometimes that's addressed during home construction because a sinkhole's not identified at this time.
These sinkholes will not be identified because they're not on the property in question. The big concern is, where's this water that's flowing through our property coming from? It could potentially be coming from this property because it is so close to us, and we are downhill from it. So that just gives us great concern over potential contamination from groundwater from the proposed development. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay.
Is there anybody that has not had a chance to speak? I'm asking if there's anybody that has not spoke yet. Because if not, for the sake of time, we've been at this now for 2 hours. So if you've already spoke, you've had your opportunity. You can direct questions to us by email if you'd like. But if there's nobody that spoke yet that would still like to speak, I'll entertain that. If not, just like all the other cases, they proceed to the Planning Commission, which would be the fourth Tuesday of every month. Those hearings are at 9 a.m. You'd be notified. Obviously, this isn't a zoning change, so only adjoining property owners, anybody's property line that touches, is required by law to be notified. So I'll just leave that out there for you all to be able to notify people that are concerned. But legally, as far as the actual notification by letter, it's only adjoiners. That will be on our website by usually the start of the month. It'll also be posted in the Oldham era as well. So if there's no other questions, we'll adjourn this meeting at 3:52. Thank you.